But if, I said, if this was going to this back then, I'd love to stay here.
Other than one day and leave Wednesday and go to the beach, give me Monday and Tuesday of work just in case we got some meetings and then go again. I said, then what else you gonna do? Go to the beach all the damn time.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, he'll enjoy it. If he doesn't
And
enjoy it, then
his medical shit from the cancer, he's on his mom's insurance. She has to work. Hundreds of thousands of dollars right now. In January, his accident, or her time is met. Or the first, whatever her year is. I mean, within the first month, it's met. They're done. And so she has to work. She has to work. She's got to work. Again, you just spend 4 days a week at the beach. Come back Sunday, give me.
which beach does he go to? Which beach does he go to?
They got a house in Myrtle. It ain't on the water, but it's close to the lake. It's in a nice neighborhood. And then shit at the surf, and they play golf.
Hey, pretty good golf.
Decent, yeah. Give me 2 damn days a week. Monday and Tuesday we're with the developers, and Tuesday I'm going to the beach. See you next Monday. Except for 1 damn day a week.
Has your boy JD got both the boys squared away? I know he says one of them seems to be doing that. The other one's still.
Every time we talk to Jeff about Simone, he's like, he's doing this, he's doing that, but he's doing a damn camper behind his mama's house. He ain't doing shit yet.
And shit, because he's about 30.
Yeah. Slade doing all right, man. I think he passed his little, I don't know what it's called, but, he's like golf pro test or whatever, one of them.
And he's still doing Dick's managing or something like that.
No, that's what I'm saying. He works for Pinehurst now. Like, he's working, like, in the pro shop, and he's like, some kind of pro or something. Like, I don't know how that shit works, what they're actually called, but he works for a resort and just passed whatever test it was he had to pass, playing, whatever. So he's moving on. He ain't never gonna kill it, but I mean, that's good for him. It's real good for him, Consider his.
JD was telling me, I think he got 2 from one over.
Ariel's always got something. She's always got something. She's an allergic reaction away from the damn emergency room any day of the week. I don't think any of it's like terminal. I think a lot of it is probably more. I don't want to make light of it, but I think a lot of it is more aggravation. Emergency room's never fun. I think a lot of it's more just bullshit. And just, it ain't. You got 6 months to live. It's just hugely inconvenient. Yeah, she's got some shit like that. She's got that vitiligo stuff, but I think that's just more skin. I think it's cancer. I don't ask. She don't like my business. People just tell me stuff, but I don't ever ask.
I imagine that affects marriage and shit. All that shit tough. All that kind of shit.
God, yeah,
All that shit makes it tough, man.
Whenever I see her, she's always in good spirits, and she's a trooper. But like, we all go to the beach for a week. She might be disappeared back home or something. I wake up and I come downstairs and where the hell's Jeff and Eric? Go take care of that hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, that gets tough.
Tiresome in more ways than one.
Oh, yeah. That'll stress you out, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I do take.
Old Jeffy, man, he keeps his.
Good dude, though.
Yeah, I told him fairly, man, you're just too damn nice. You ain't got to go around being an asshole. And I was like, you're just too damn nice.
I always, when I talk to him, I wonder about his business.
All right, looks like we have the people in the room we need now, so thank you for being here. We're so thankful for your time. And we will now come to order. And have our transit system plan update. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is just a panel discussion.
Oh, the panel
It's not
discussion.
it's
That's
not-
right.
So thank you, Joe, Anna, and Tanya for being here. Maybe you want to lead off with some brief introductions and then just jump right into the panel discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Brent. Good afternoon, everybody. Joe Bost, Chief Advocacy Officer for the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. We'll get to introductions actually for Tanya and Anna shortly. I do want to just kick off here and tell you why it's important for me to be here. The current 2030 Transit Corridor System Plan was updated and adopted by this body in 2006 to really link our areas key centers of economic activity through multiple transit modes. And back in 2017, 2018, CATS restructured its entire bus system, all in an effort to be proactive for the population growth that our region was anticipating. That growth came and will continue to increase. A significant data point that the CLT Alliance uses when advocating for the importance of infrastructure is that it estimates that 1.5 million new residents will be moving to our region by 2050. But because of past efforts, we aren't starting from a place of weakness. Largely because of this organization, the plans are there. The foundation is there. We have the know-how, and given the public and private sector's outpouring of support for the 1% sales tax legislative proposal, we have the determination. What we need now is the theoretical to be turned into the realistic. This update to the system plan represents some of the most important policy and investment decisions that our community will make over the next 30 years. We're taking a vision that has no funding and no means to advancement and turning it into a plan of action with realistic funding structures that has received overwhelming support. So Brent, thanks for having us here today to really talk about the importance of investment in our region from an economic growth perspective, but also economic mobility. So with me today are Anna London and Tanya Jamison. Tanya, since you're closer to me, we'll start with you, and then Anna, go to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Jameson. I am the Director of Civic Advancement with Leading on Opportunity, and our organization is focused on improving economic mobility in the region, and we work primarily with partners like the county, the city, CATS, et cetera, to improve economic mobility, and we do that work through data, strategy, and policy. So I'm here on behalf to talk about the importance of policy and decisions that you all will make that will help improve the transit system, which will therefore help people improve their economic mobility in their communities. Anna?
Good afternoon. I'm Anna London, and I am the President and CEO for Charlotte Works, the Workforce Development Board for Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. And we serve as the leader of the workforce ecosystem here in Mecklenburg County. So making sure that our ecosystem is aligned. So we connect, convene, and align the ecosystem. So I'm here to share with you how transportation impacts workforce development from both the business perspective as well as the job seeker perspective.
Thank you both. Anna, let's start with you. Talk to us about the state of the labor market here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities?
Sure. So in August, the unemployment rate for our MSA, for our region, was around 4.3%. And so that is considered a lower unemployment rate. So that means, though, that many of the individuals that are currently unemployed are those that may have more significant barriers or challenges to employment. One of the opportunities that we have with the labor force, with workforce development in general, is really connecting job seekers with true career pathways. Also connecting businesses with skilled and qualified candidates. What we continue to hear is that we do have a very resilient labor force or workforce, and we do have a very competitive workforce in this community. There are good jobs available, and there are job seekers who are looking for good jobs or family-sustaining employment. And so it really is just working together with the other providers in this community to really make sure that we are addressing the two major barriers that we do here is childcare, that's for another discussion, but transportation. So the two major issues that we are constantly hearing from both businesses as well as job seekers is transportation and childcare challenges. And so one of the things that we're currently working on is working directly with a large number of businesses to map from provider, training provider, education institution, the employment opportunities from that credential or completion of a program directly to employment here in Mecklenburg County. And so people are skilled and qualified, but we do need to address the barriers that exist, such as transportation.
I got to tell you, I talk to, and I'm sure you do too, Anna and Tanya, you as well, to employers every single day, and they say transportation and talent. And one of the ancillary issues of transportation is the childcare issue. And Tanya, you and I have spent a lot of time working on childcare, which is how we've gotten to know each other really, really well, which is the integration of the business community and the work on leading on opportunity. But talk to us a little bit about the work on leading on opportunity, the Chetty study, and where we are today.
So for those of you who are not familiar, Dr. Raj Chetty initially was out of Berkeley, now he's at Harvard, released a study in 2014. In that study, he ranked cities on their economic mobility. Charlotte ranked back then, or the Charlotte region ranked back then, 50th out of 50. And so that has really led the charge for the public-private partnerships, the energy that we see throughout the region to improve economic mobility. Since then, he released another study earlier this summer, and Charlotte now, or the Charlotte region, ranks 38th out of 50 in economic mobility. So we are no longer last. We are moving up, and we're moving in the right direction. We were number 3 in cities that made the overall most progress throughout the country. And one of those reasons that we saw that type of progress is because although Black children and families were able to improve their economic mobility, which is great, we also were able to stabilize economic mobility for white families as well. And so we are seeing that progress. One of the things that I say often when we talk about this, though, is that the results and the progress that we're seeing are a result of investments that were made back in the early 2000s, late 90s. It's not necessarily something that we just did within the last 5 years or so, but it's really the policies and investments that were done back in the early 2000s. So when you think about the budget, when you think about what you all are doing for MTC, you are laying the groundwork for these future generation, for your children and your children's children. And transportation is a critical part of it. As Anna said, people need transportation to access the job opportunities, but they also need transportation to access and be able to take their child to child care, be able to pick their child up without getting penalized because they're late. And so we need to have a functioning transportation system so that we can move people about this community efficiently.
Tanya, you touched on this, but the task force highlighted the issue of access to public transportation as part of the child and family stability work, determining economic mobility. So talk a little bit more, maybe double click down as to why this is so important and what should we as the community be doing?
Yeah, in 2017, our Opportunity Task Force report released a study looking at, okay, why is Charlotte doing so poorly in economic mobility? Why is our region doing so poorly? And transportation was one of the biggest issues. And they found that transportation and the lack of good quality transportation, reliable transportation, also resulted in the resegregation that we see in our neighborhoods and our communities. And we know that without transportation, people can't make the connections that they need to also build social capital. If you're relying on a bus system that takes like an hour or two to get you anywhere, you can't necessarily do anything other than potentially go to work, but you can't build the social networks that you need as an individual to get ahead, or the networks that your children need to get ahead as well. So transportation was one of the things identified. As a result of that, CATS did some rerouting of the bus system and started doing some more cross-city routes, and so it's not just the hub and spoke system, but that is just the beginning of what we're seeing and what is necessary so that we can actually improve economic mobility. Because it's not just about getting to work, it's also about what families need. So it's getting to grocery stores. We only have like less than 50% of our population lives within a half mile of a grocery store. And so if you can't get healthy, good food for your families, then you're not feeding your family well, you're not taking care of yourselves. It's getting to a doctor's appointments. So when we think about our rental community, especially like our immigrant community, they tend to be renters. So it's also being able to get to a laundromat and be able to take care of yourself and go to work feeling like, you know, you are responsible, you're reflective, and you're somebody people want to be around. So it's more than just getting to jobs, it's all the critical destinations that impact our lives every day that we take for granted because many of us have cars and we have our own transportation, but those who don't, those who are critical to the infrastructure of our city, they don't have that same luxury.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And Anna, when we were together this summer meeting about ways that we could work better together, we talked about kind of the intersection of mobility and transportation as it relates to the workforce and workforce development related programs that you all are working on. So talk to us about some real life examples of what this means for workers in Charlotte every day.
Sure. So kind of two key statements that I would like to share is transportation. Let's look at transportation as an economic lifeline. So a study in New York shared that an improved public transit system in New York, whenever they improved their public transit, it led to a 33% reduction in unemployment. And so if we think about transportation as an economic lifeline and really connecting communities, rather than thinking about putting jobs in specific neighborhoods with the mentality or the vision that we will place jobs in neighborhoods where people live and people are going to live and work in the same neighborhood. That is not the answer. We really need to connect communities together so that people can live, work, and play throughout our entire region, but throughout the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. Also, in another study, Charlotte ranked 41st out of 50 major U.S. metros for public transportation. And so this not only starkly limits opportunities, but it also shares just how limiting that is for people that are living in our community that don't have access to reliable transportation. A couple of examples, we have individuals that we're serving in our NC Works Career Centers who do rely on public transportation to get to and from work. And so if they're living in the east or the west part of this city, and I know that is not, we know what the Crescent is, and as part of the Leading on Opportunity efforts, but those two areas, the east and the west, also have the highest unemployment rates. And it could take up to or over 2 hours for people to travel. And I know that you all know this information, but just to give real life examples, but it could take over 2 hours for people to travel from east to west or west to east to try and get from where they live to where they work, or from where they live to get their kids to school or childcare, and then again to where they work, and then do that all over again at the end of the day. A couple of real-life examples of the job seekers that we're serving. We have a few job seekers who are actually working in construction, and those construction companies have allowed trusted employees to actually utilize company vehicles to travel to and from work every day, because construction sites rotate. You may be on one site one week and a different site the next week, and they can't rely on public transportation to get them to and from home and work. And especially as the sites transition or change. And so we do have construction companies that have been willing to allow trusted employees to take company vehicles. However, that's not a solution for everyone, and some people don't have a driver's license. Another option is that we've seen utilized is that businesses will provide a stipend to the job seekers who do have their own transportation to pick up and drop off and carpool with other employees that are working at the same company. However, that is a great solution until that employee loses that job, transitions to another job, or needs to take a day off work. Then that means a whole group of individuals from that community are not coming to and from work on that day. So then it decreases or eliminates transportation for all of those individuals that are carpooling together. One final kind of real life example is we had some individuals who completed a training program, earned a credential, and started working at an assisted living in South Charlotte. And they were traveling from East Charlotte to South Charlotte. And the bus schedule does not align with their shift schedule. And this was a couple of years ago. And so they were arriving late to work every day. And it was only, maybe 20, 30 minutes late, but whenever they're operating on a shift schedule, that's a really big deal for that employer. And so the employer was about to let go, fire those employees. Our business services team was able to go in, have a conversation with that with their manager, and they were able to implement flexible schedules. But those are daily things that are requiring, the time, effort, and energy of the team that's trying to help them navigate the transportation challenges. And so just imagine, how if our transportation system and if our investments are bold and inclusive in our transportation infrastructure, how we could decrease unemployment and also make sure that individuals have access that currently are really challenged with having access to transportation.
I just want to tag team in here too, because Anna brings up some great examples of how employers are trying to work around this issue of not having reliable transportation. But a recent UNC study came out looking at the 10-minute neighborhoods and the barriers around transportation. And one of the things they lifted up was that some employers are requiring that applicants have a car in order to to apply for the job. So imagine the cooling effect that has for someone who is trying to provide for their family, wants to get better jobs, but your application saying that you have to have a car to even bother to apply for that job. And so these are missed opportunities and untapped talent that we are not being able to reach because they just don't have a car to get there. And the other point I want to lift up too is that it's not just a Charlotte issue. Northern towns, we work with some of the nonprofits up in the northern communities as well, and transportation is a huge barrier for some of the low-income neighborhoods up there too. So how are we thinking about this regionally, that we are improving our transportation system throughout the county?
Yeah, I think both of you made really important points, and one of those important points was we are not talking about just the city of Charlotte.
No.
We're talking inclusively about Charlotte and the region and Mecklenburg County, so I think it's really important to note. Anna, I want to go back to you for a second because you have a unique perspective because you talk to both employees and employers. So talk to us about what employers are telling you about attracting and retaining workforce, and what are you hearing from prospective employees in the market?
Yes, so other than employers needing to find skilled and qualified candidates, they're also talking about and sharing the challenges with people not having transportation. So many employers that we know of that we are working with, one of their requirements, a hiring policy, is that you do need to have a driver's license. And so that's a key challenge. Many people don't have a driver's license. Even some of our municipalities have that as a requirement. And so many individuals don't have a driver's license. However, the reason that employers say that they try to require that and that they do waive it some is because of the lack of reliable transportation in the entire county and how long it takes to get from one place to the next. And so that is one of the key challenges that we are hearing. Of course, the main concern is employers just being able to have access to skilled and qualified candidates and knowing exactly how to source and recruit from specific programs. But one of the key things that we are focused on is making sure that the communities that are in the highest unemployment rate areas, so again, the East and the West, that they have access to good jobs, but by way of they do need reliable transportation in order to do so.
Tanya, I want to go back to you. The task force had identified the connection between affordable housing and transportation. So give us some context as to what that means for our community.
Yeah, we need to have our affordable housing near our transportation centers, especially where we are now. Like whether it's a good bus stop that's a safe bus stop that provides crosswalks so people can access these bus stops safely, or whether or not it's bike lanes that are protected bike lanes. We are putting our people in affordable housing situations, but if they don't have access to transportation, either it's their own or the CAT system, then they can't get to the jobs that are necessary. As Anna said, the East and the West are sides that don't have the same economic development. So until we can start building up and making sure that we have more economical or more equitable communities throughout, then we're putting our residents at a disadvantage.
Last thing I wanted to touch on for you, Tanya, CAT's Envision My Ride. The MTC is going to get an update this afternoon. I guess it's now called Better Bus. I appreciate the terminology, actually. I like that a lot. But talk to us about why this is really important to the work that you're doing with Leading on Opportunity.
Yeah, as we said before, the hub and spoke system isn't working for most people. I mean, we're talking about 2-hour rides to get to and from anywhere. So the Envision My Ride, especially with the micro transit as a potential tool in this, the different shuttle buses as tools in this. We need every tool that we can in the toolbox so that we can move people around efficiently. Envision My Ride gives us more tools to do this, and we want to be able to move people around affordably and safely as well. Whatever their means of transportation is, we've got to be able to move them around affordably and safely so we're not exposing people, and when it's hot as all get out outside and you're not sitting at an uncovered bus stop or area that's doesn't have any shading from trees. If it's, you've got to walk across to get to that bus stop, that you have a crosswalk with some traffic mediation so that you can get there safely. The same way we want people to stop when they see a school bus, we want people to slow down when they see a CATS bus so that we can get people on and off the bus in a safe manner.
Anna, I want to go back to you before, I think we have time for questions from the group, and then we've got one final question after questions from you all. You all have a ton of workforce data, and you talk about the Charlotte Talent Map quite a bit when I hear you speak. So why don't you talk to us about what that data tells us and how it's applicable here?
Sure. So, and I'll speak from, because the narrative in the story is pretty similar to what I've shared, but I'll speak from the perspective of really the number of individuals that we're serving and what that talent map looks like. So so our fiscal year is July to June, and in the first 2 months of this fiscal year, we served over 10,000 individuals. And the majority of those individuals do match the ridership of CATS. And so the demographics and the ridership, those individuals that are utilizing public transportation are the individuals that we are also serving. And they are, and the individuals that we are serving really do span across, the majority of them do span across west to east or east to west. And so, going back to the unemployment rates, those are the highest unemployment rate zip codes in our community, and they have the least amount of access to public transportation to get throughout the entire county or the entire area. And I do want to touch on, too, research done and kind of what Tanya shared. So what we know is that the research by Raj Chetty shared that someone's ability to, for upward mobility, someone's economic opportunity really does depend on their access to other individuals that are working. And so not necessarily, just your parents, but having access and living in a community where people are working. And so if we think about where the talent that are the highest unemployed are living in the community and their limited access for work and employment, we are doing a disservice to not really be bold and inclusive, if we're not bold and inclusive in our investments and making sure that there's rapid transit or light rail access to the individuals so that they can have access to and living in a community where all of the individuals in their community and the families are working and they have good jobs. And so, and that really does predict their level of economic mobility, not just focusing on where their parents work, but their entire neighborhood having access to moving around the community for employment opportunities. We have many employers that are saying to us that their challenges, they have such significant talent needs that they would love to be intentional about hiring untapped talent. But again, we have to make sure that those individuals have access and get to and from employment, because at the end of the day, they still need people to be at work, on time, and reliable for those positions. And so employers are willing to be very flexible if possible, but they do still need for people to be at work on time and be reliable.
And just tagging on to what she was saying about Dr. Chetty's most recent report, it's the parents of the children's friends that are biggest predictors of how successful these children will be. So it's for these kids to have access to their friends' parents and what their friends' parents are doing. It opens up their world, especially if they're having better economic connectedness with these individuals.
You heard it, transportation's key. So with that, Brent, we'll open it up for questions. And then again, like I said, we've got one final question for the group, but questions?
All right, not seeing any, you can, oh, go ahead.
just want to make a follow-up comment, and I think I heard Tanya say this. The crux of the Chetty research that came out was that the key to economic mobility is social capital. And as we think about that, as we connect to transit, reliability of time, reliability of service is key. But also there's a factor of commuter decay where that social mobility or that social capital is lost with commutes that are over a significant distance of time. So somebody working on the west side of Charlotte commuting to Huntersville loses a lot of that social capital. But it's not just due to, I want to say, like how long it takes to get to the bus ride and so forth. It's that you are losing that time in your community with people who are also working. So I hope that, as these discussions go forward, we can consider planning as towns, as municipalities, consider planning our commercial areas, our jobs in relationship to how they build on that social capital that's so important for economic mobility.
All right, let's hear that last question.
Awesome. Well, Tanya, let's start with you, and then I'll answer the same question at the end here. Leave us with something to think about. You've got the mic in front of the MTC. These decision makers have an opportunity to shape the future of this region over the next 30 years and really beyond. So talk to them about what they should consider as they take up this effort.
Yeah, what to consider is that our current transportation system, as hard as Brent and Jason and the teams are working to be able to move people efficiently, it's not enough. It's not enough to connect people to jobs. It's not enough to connect people to opportunities. And when I talk about economic mobility, and I talk about, especially when I'm talking about housing, we're not building this region for those of us who are here right now. We are building it for future generations. Studies have shown, Learning Tree has a study out this year talking about most young people move back to their hometowns. That's where they end up living in the end. And so when you think about these decisions that you're making decisions whether it's for your own children when they decide to move back or your grandchildren, but it's those of us who touch our lives every day, and what type of community do we want to leave for them?
Yes. So very similar to what Tanya said, just as our current economic mobility outcomes today were set by the decisions that were made 10 to 20 years ago, the transportation decisions that are being made today will define Charlotte's future workforce, economic growth, and environmental sustainability. And if we think about, how public transit can really impact our future economic mobility and upward mobility, it can really be a bridge that bridges the gaps caused by spatial mismatch. It could also help to reduce the congestion and cut the environmental costs of commuting. But it's more than just a solution to logistical challenges. It's about building equity, fostering economic mobility, and ensuring that no one in our community is left behind.
Thank you both. If we want to continue to be a world-class community and region, we need to take big and bold steps. And before us, we have a funding mechanism, potentially, to fund some of those major transportation initiatives that we have before us. And so this body has the opportunity to shape what those right solutions are for the next 30 years and beyond. Everybody says, we don't want to be Atlanta, right? Everybody says, oh, the traffic's bad. It is, admittedly, it's very bad. But we have an opportunity to be better than Atlanta. We already are, but we can put ourselves in a position to thrive for the next 30 years and beyond. And so I'll tell you, the business community is 100% behind trying to get this right, to make sure we come alongside you, work with you, do everything we can to support this initiative, because we understand that 117 people are moving here every single day. We have a great problem before us, that we have a ton of growth. The opposite, if we stop growing, we have different set of challenges, but we've got first world challenges right now. And so we've got the opportunity to shape the narrative right now for the future. And so as you all consider what the right next steps are, trust that we're here to be a resource to you all, and just appreciate the opportunity to be before you today. So Commissioner Brent, thank you, and we'll leave it with that.
Joe, Anna, and Tanya, we're so grateful for your time. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I think a lot of the things that were said by the group here, for me, resonate, especially when we start thinking about the information that we saw earlier. 70% of our riders don't have a car. Over 50% don't have a driver's license. And then when you start thinking about the efficiency of the system, reliability is very, very important. And I think we're making some meaningful headway over the last couple of years. But frequency is also very important. The other stat that we showed you that maybe flew under the radar a little bit was the percentage of people who make connections in the system. And that is really, really important, because if you make a connection, it is very difficult to have a short ride to wherever you're going across the region. And to compound that problem, when we have a high number of routes that may be over 30-minute frequency, and you need to connect, you end up in sort of that hard position of the mismatch between your first ride and the next ride, and it just sort of compounds, and that travel time just gets greater and greater and greater. I commend anyone who has to, travel from the far east side to the west side or north to south. That's very difficult with our existing bus network and how that ties in to the rapid transit corridors. These are all very important things, and I think it really sets us up to lead into the next phase of today. I think this morning was a lot about budget and what we're doing. The next phase of today's presentations are about the future and the transit system plan, both Better Bus and our 2030 plan, or the Rapid Corridors plan. With that, if it's all right, I'd like to turn it over to Kelly Goforth to lead us off.
Okay, so this afternoon, we have a series of sessions planned that focus on the transit system plan update. This first session, we're going to provide a brief overview of the process, some regional context, some more detail on the Better Bus plan, and then an update on the current status of the rapid transit projects. So first, just a brief refresher on the proposed process and timeline. We reviewed that at last month's MTC meeting, so just a few slides to go over that briefly. So the transit system plan update is an opportunity to really bring our transit vision to reality. And through this process of updating the plan, we want to create an integrated bus and rail plan that balances the needs across our community. And we want to use a transparent and inclusive process that develops a realistic and implementable plan. So we've developed a three-phase process to develop the updated transit system plan. First, we're going to begin with confirming the goals and objectives for the system plan, as well as updating our baseline assumptions. Second, we'll move into developing and evaluating different scenarios to meet those goals and objectives. And finally, we'll seek to develop consensus around the recommendations for an updated transit system plan. So this graphic provides an overview of the proposed schedule for this process. This fall, we're beginning our stakeholder and public engagement on the goals and objectives, as well as completing a lot of the technical work needed to update those baseline assumptions. And so we're going to talk more about goals and objectives and the financial plan and assumptions and inputs later in the next two sessions. Starting in January of 2025, we will then begin to develop and evaluate alternative scenarios, including the financial analysis. And our target for recommendations and MTC adoption of the transit system plan is late spring 2025. And of course, in each phase of this process, we'll have robust public engagement as well. So we've had a couple of questions about how the transit system plan update fits in with the MPO's Metropolitan Transportation Plan process, so I wanted to just briefly touch on that. So to advance in the federal funding process, all of our major transit projects need to be included in the region's financially constrained long-range transportation plan, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. We're going to be coordinating closely with CRTPO as well as FTA throughout this process. The CRTPO process to develop the 2055 MTP is already underway. And so this transit system plan update process will be happening in parallel and in coordination with that process. And we anticipate that the transit system plan that will be adopted by the MTC in spring of 2025 would then be included in the 2055 MTP. That draft MTP is scheduled to be released in the summer of 2025. That will then go through a public review process as well as air quality conformity analysis. And the current schedule for adoption of the 2055 MTP is spring of 2026. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about regional context. Hopefully that works.
Okay, great. So before we dive into talking about Better Bus and the 2030 Transit System Plan as it relates to our overall system plan update, we thought it would be helpful to discuss some regional context and how this fits into other initiatives underway. As Kelly just stated, the Transit System Plan update is intended to fold into the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update that CRTPO is currently underway. But this body has also had conversations at a regional scale. We worked with Central Illinois Regional Council to develop the Connect Beyond Plan, which was set across 2 states and 12 counties, 5,000 square miles, a fairly large area. But inside of that, CRTPO is just a piece of that. There's multiple MPOs and rural planning organizations within that as well. And we've been coordinating with them to set forth a general strategy across the region with 5 mobility moves that this body endorsed back in 2021 to create mobility-friendly places, so that connection between transit and land use, expanding mobility choices through the use of technology. Oh, I moved back quickly. I guess PowerPoint's trying to tell me to move on. But investing in strategic mobility corridors and building a better bus network and strengthening those rural to urban connections were also a big component of the 5 moves that were a part of the Connect Beyond effort. But the growth that's happening within our MPO, CRTPO, is also happening across the region. So across that 12-county area, it's anticipated that by 2045, the population will increase by over 50%. And this was the past MTP for each of those MPOs, so we anticipate that'll be even further. So as we think about mobility and thinking about how we fit within the region, transit is a key component, not only just for our MPO, but for other MPOs in the region at large. And many of you were involved in that discussion with the Advancing the Plan Committee led by Central Illinois to discuss ways that we could coordinate across those boundaries, because air quality, job access, congestion doesn't really pay attention to boundaries. Those happen across our infrastructure. And so we pulled a couple of slides from the 2055 current draft plan that CRTPO is pulling together to talk about some of the population and growth challenges that we'll be facing over the next many years. And this sounds like a broken record for us. Each MTP we do, we're showing a lot of growth. And it's continuing to grow, and we expect that to continue over time. But we've seen a 25% increase in population from 2010 to 2022. an increase in our minority population from 2010 to 2022. And we've seen an increase in our median age, so that's something to think about as we age, then how do we improve transportation for all layers of age across our region? Employment and economics, and that's also been mapped as a part of the MTP effort, that Uptown Charlotte certainly is a huge generator of employment, but we have increasing employment centers across our region. We've seen an increase in median household income since 2010, so the area in some ways may have become more affluent in certain pockets, but it doesn't take away that we still have pockets of poverty within our community that's resistant to change, mostly due to the inability to have access to quality transit. And going forward, I mean, as we think about how we connect those key destinations or regional activity centers, high-capacity transit, be it high-frequency bus or light rail, bus rapid transit, or other things using our toll facilities throughout the region, will be key in strategies to connect those regional activity centers. And as we move forward with a multimodal vision, the City of Charlotte's adopted a strategy around increasing our mode share, modes other than riding in a car by yourself, which we call affectionately non-SOV, single occupancy vehicle trips. The MPO is also looking at that and seeing where we could have potential capacity to increase that. You see there on the graph today, everything in blue is our non-SOV trips. The goal would be to maintain that, but as we look forward into the future, how do we gain new capacity in non-SOV trips? And honestly, the greatest way to go towards that non-SOV trips is high-capacity transit, but also high-frequency bus service as well. So that's a key strategy, not only for CATS, but also for the region, to increase our non-SOV trips. So key takeaways that we're seeing with our partner, CRTPO, as they look at their MTP, that goes without saying, rapid growth means expanded travel demand. Commute times are going to increase over time, so how do we can provide that frequent, reliable service? But there is certainly a need for more equitable and affordable travel choices. But reliance on auto has an impact to climate. As we increase our emissions, transit is a great climate tool to provide an option and mitigate that. But ultimately, there's limited resources. There will not be enough funding to build everything that's on all of our plans, and we'll show that to you today as we talk through how do we set priorities and strategies up with our goals and objectives. But how we prioritize that will be critical as we move through this process. So before we get into the kind of the meat of the transit system plan, as I talk about Better Bus, any questions around the regional context? Okay. So we have two strategic maps and plans that have been adopted over the years by this body. We have the Envision My Ride system plan that was formally adopted by MTC in May of 2022, and we have the 2030 Transit System Plan, which started back in 1998 with the 2025 Transit and Land Use Plan, and it's been adopted many times over the years. These two plans are not islands to themselves. As you see in the statistics from our community surveys, people travel between both bus and rail. We're a highly transfer system. So as we work through two unconstrained visions, how we pull them together in a single vision, it's critical to think through the customer, how they move through that. Because if you're in your car and you're driving through, you're on I-77 and you get off at Sanford Road, you don't have to get out of your car and transfer to another road to complete your travel. So finding ways to transfer between high-capacity services and local bus is critical to improving the overall experience for our customers. As it relates to the Better Bus component of this effort, as I stated before, Envision My Ride, adopted by this body in May of 2022, is an unconstrained, bold, aspirational vision of high-frequency transit across the county, connected to mobility hubs, improved stops and transfer centers, but also microtransit throughout the county. As we look to set priorities, we are looking through the Better Bus effort to look at how we can better connect need and opportunity, and look at where high capacity and high frequency transit could be the most effective, but also see how we can improve our services system-wide, and look to our mobility hubs and other amenity proposals to enhance the customer experience for all, and then prioritize some of our microtransit zones for some of this initial implementation. And Better Bus will set those priorities by looking at how do we improve our overall operational efficiency, develop those service amenity priorities, and ultimately enhance the customer experience. As stated many times throughout the day, and we heard our panel state that, bus service is the backbone of our system. Nearly 60% of each day, our customers are on our bus. And as you look at the ridership there on the top of this graph and the breakdown of our services, and then the community survey, you can see there that, over 60% of either bus or rail are either going to school or they're going to work. The vast majority of our, customers on the bus side are 58% have no driver's license. They're not able to drive. And then 70% with no working vehicle. So as we think through, the face of our system and the people who use our system today, those connections are very critical when it comes to making the transfer and then making those frequency right. As I think Anna stated, that shift worker working on East Charlotte and going to South Park, if they're connecting to two 60-minute routes or a 30-minute route, making those connections are critical. Frequency is how you could potentially solve that problem, because if you miss that connection, waiting an hour can delay your arrival time at that shift job. Yes, ma'am.
Question. Obviously, we've been talking about Envision My Ride for a long time. I don't recall when the Better Bus phrase and the map came online. Is this a recent development or no?
So that is a part of how we're setting the priorities as it falls into the transit system plan update. So think that we're taking this unconstrained vision and going through this additional filter to fold it into the system plan update. And that is what we're calling Better Bus, because it's additional efforts underway within that umbrella. We're doing a runtime analysis, setting priorities for our bus stops and mobility hubs and microtransit zones.
Okay, so Better Bus is new. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Okay. And it's an attempt to take the unconstrained, meaning there was no actual budget with available monies associated with Envision My Ride, and an attempt to live within the actual dollars that are available. Is that a true statement?
It is taking that unconstrained vision and setting priorities that if we working within our limited resources, but also setting priorities for when we have new funding, because what we'll go through today, what's being recommended out of Better Bus is unable to be funded with our current resources.
I'm sorry, will you repeat that?
It's unable to be funded with our current resources.
Okay, so Better Bus would be what we could do if the proposed legislation is successful.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So we've thrown a lot of numbers at you throughout the course of the day. And then as we look at how we evaluate and look at the various, be it the system plan, the 2030 plan, or the Better Bus plan, and set priorities through that, you're going to hear a lot of conversations around time and money. But if we think about our customer, and this were some interviews we took a few years ago, you can see on some of the bolded text here as we think about time. In the context of building out projects and implementing a plan, time is also how long it will take you to do that, and money is how much it will cost to do that. But to our customer, time and money means something very different. And going from a 60-minute route to a 30-minute route, or a 30-minute route to a 15-minute route, is giving people time back throughout the course of the day to make additional connections, and being able to connect to opportunity to generate wealth and opportunity for their family. So as we think through this, I encourage you to think through people who use the system every day, and think about that time and money also in that same context. So, but to understand how to set priorities, we need to understand where our greatest needs are throughout the community. And through the Better Bus effort, we've done some analysis, looking at census data, looking at what's called longitudinal employment housing dynamics. That's the LEHD that's on there. That's also a census tool, where we're mapping where people live of need, where people work, where the jobs are, where the opportunities are to increase peak service and all-day service. We've done some analysis in that space that is called transit propensity. It's looking at a map overall spatially to understand where higher capacity transit could be used, where better connections could be used, but ultimately where people are trying to get to. And I took two of those out. We had many metrics that were developed for the Better Bus effort, but I just pulled two for illustrative purposes today to look at jobs and housing. Because if we think about some of the basic component of a transit system is to connect people from where they live to where they work. That's a key component of, and it's something that we can compete for if done effectively. And on the map here, you see the red being where we have a high number and high density of jobs. So this would be all jobs. So this would be office work, this would be retail, this would be commercial, this would be warehouse, industrial. So all the jobs that within our community, you can see, come no surprise that some of the high spots that are showing up on the map here, we have the airport area, the Westinghouse area, uptown Charlotte, South Park, but also the retail centers and commercial areas in Matthews and Pineville, the university area and the corridors along 77. That's where those kind of job concentrations are. And as we heard from the panel today, that this east to west connection, and I would say east-west of the county versus east-west in Charlotte, because if you think about all of East Charlotte, going east all the way to the county line over to part of Mint Hill, further out Albemarle Road, or all the way over to past the airport area, you see these concentrations of areas of need where there are low income, our senior citizen community, disabled, and also our minority populations typically resonate within that east-west connection. So as a transit agency, one of our core responsibilities is to take where people live, as you see on this map, east and west, to get them to those jobs. And then making those connections is critical from a transfer standpoint, as we talked about CTC today, how critical that is to our operation. But also as we think about the system as a whole, once we are able to build out higher capacity transit corridors, be it rapid transit or a bus, making those connections at stations will be critical to help with that crosstown connection.
Jason?
Yes.
Sorry. Who pulled this data together on jobs? When's it from? Is it all jobs, or is it like certain income level jobs?
Yeah, so this is the 2021 LEHD data. That census data does lag a bit, and that's from the census. And then the housing component was pulled from the American Community Survey, which is also a census product.
It's all jobs.
Yeah.
Interesting, because, Pineville to Steel Creek to West Charlotte, I hadn't previously thought of it as the most dense area for employment, but that seems to be what this is saying.
In that area around the Westinghouse, there's a large amount of employment in that area, mostly warehouse industrial. And so there's a large concentration in that area.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so as we, map this out to look at our priorities and how we set priorities, the focus for us is, and then you'll see when we get to the recommendations, is that it would be on frequency, but also quality of service is really important. And that gets into weekends, weeknights, and midday service versus only peak only. So understanding, the face of our transit, people of need, and, people that need us do use us each and every day. And also, taking those maps and transit propensity indexes, we've come up with a series of priorities through the Better Bus effort. And so taking that kind of broad aspirational vision of close to 20 high-frequency routes, which was in the unconstrained vision, 19 microtransit zones, we've come up with a series of what we feel are the most important coming out of the Envision My Ride. And it's looking at, our top 10 to 15 routes, bringing them to 20 minutes or better. Today, we have one route that's 15 minutes or better. That's the route number 9. All other routes are primarily either 20, and a large portion are 30 minutes a day, and a significant portion are actually 60 minutes. So we would propose that to affect 60% of our existing ridership, taking those to 20 minutes or better. We also see that there's additional market capture in our express corridors. What we've heard from our express customers, yes, they want more frequency, but they want us to adapt our schedules to expand those peak hours. As we see that there is still hybrid work, but people are often, may come to work in the morning at, say, pre-pandemic it was a pretty solid 9 to 5, but today it might be 10 to 3 or 9 to 2. And so expanding the hours of service for express routes could, we feel, better serve our customers. And then as we look system-wide to improve across the network, across the county, bringing a more of a minimum service level of 30 minutes in the peak, and then looking at continuing our microtransit program by focusing in on the Sugar Creek area, the Hidden Valley community, and the University Research Park, but also adding a zone in Matthews to the Arboretum area, in addition to the zone that we'll be implementing next year in the northern communities. So we see that, as we went through this analysis, this is what has rang true to us based upon what we see as the highest need in our community. We'll also be working through how do we prioritize, because we also had a very aspirational vision for improving bus shelters. We had 3,000 stops within our system. As we went through our evaluation and took that refined way to look at our bus stops based on frequency of service, on need and location to affordable housing, we have a series of stops that would be improved to include shelters and benches. Close to 600 shelters were recommended through that effort. And so if you do the math, it would take many years to get to that point. We will go through an additional layer of prioritization to see where those shelter improvements could line up with our high frequency and 30-minute improvements, but also how do we take those shelters improvements and look at our mobility hubs where those transfers are critical. And I include operators in here too, because operators, in some ways, are our customers as well. I mean, they're out there each and every day. So improving the ability for them to have additional locations to take breaks. For currently today, close to 2/3 of our bus operators take breaks at the CTC. And so the ability to have other hubs outside of CTC will also help with that ability to create transfer out of CTC. And so as we move our network around, identifying priorities for mobility hubs and stops will be key to understanding how we fold those additional needs into the transit system plan update. And just like the jobs and housing map that we analyzed, there were other metrics we looked at, but we also mapped some of the benefits. And here's 2 examples of those benefits that if we increase, within 30 minutes, over 27 more job opportunities are available during the peak periods to our low-income and minority populations based upon that better bus network that I just showed. I think Tanya mentioned the connections to grocery stores and to fresh and affordable food. By implementing the better bus network, we would see a 16% increase in access to more grocery stores. Now, there is other opportunities within that full Envision My Ride, but just at that most basic level, proposed base network, a better bus, we see these increases that would come from that. So as we look forward to showcase these recommendations and get some public feedback on what we're seeing as our priorities, we are setting up some engagement opportunities in November. We'll be having an open house at the Goodwill Opportunity Campus on November 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll have virtual public meetings with internal and external stakeholders, but we'll also having pop-ups. And we feel, going to where people are, because if you're on a bus, it can sometimes be hard to go to a public meeting. So we feel it behooves us that we need to go to our customers. And so we'll be having pop-ups at the CTC, at high ridership locations to see, did we get this right? Is there something that we missed? Is there a corridor that's not 20 minutes recommended for the future? What would they recommend to us? So we'll be getting some feedback with that, and that'll give us ample opportunity to take that feedback and fold that into the upcoming work for the transit system plan update.
Quick question, and maybe you've already mentioned this, but just so I can get some clarity. So you said that we can't do any of this within the existing resources that we have, but is there any way to accomplish any of it by reconfiguring any of the resources that we already have?
Our system is, our route structure today, our current frequency is hard to adjust given that, most of our routes are at 60 minutes, it's hard to pull from a 60-minute route to improve, say, a route of need, say on like Monroe Road, for example, if we want to take that from 30 minutes to 20 minutes. So we don't have a lot to work with within our current frequency. But as we look, the runtime analysis is something that could help us. So if we understand what our true running time is, we could see that if we have a lot of time that we're spending out on the road that could be folded back into the network, then I think there's opportunities there. So there are some strategies, but it would be very limited and likely around the edges. So we could, potentially look at improving, better weekend service. So if we don't impact the peak, we have a bit more flexibility if we put more midday, nights, and weekends, but we're fairly limited in what we can do at any measurable amount.
So this is all additive then?
Yes.
So using the Northern Townsend Microtransit as an example, that is something, right? That's a new service. There's no new funding. We're bringing that out. But that is why, as we roll out microtransit, it will be important for us to pull back Village Rider, right? Now, we think that that will be acceptable because we do believe that microtransit will provide a higher level of service to more people than the Village Rider, but it becomes trade-offs. Now, Mr. Lawrence is right. There are some incremental things we can do. We're doing shelters and those kinds of things. And I think it's great that we've done roughly 30 this year. With 3,000 in the system, at 30 a year, it'll be a long time. And so as we think about it, there are certainly improvements both operationally, from efficiency standpoint that we can continue to make and seek to make. But it really just leads you to incremental gains that are very, very small over a very long period. If you want to move the needle in a meaningful way quickly, new revenue is required.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Okay. So next, I'd like to give a brief update on where we are with the Red Line, Silver Line, and Gold Line projects. First, though, before I get to that, just wanted to touch on the approach that we're taking with these major projects. Our focus and goal is to ensure project readiness to enter into the FTA funding process. We received funding for both the Blue Line and the Blue Line Extension projects from the Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program. And we plan to seek funding for our future projects from that program as well. This program is a competitive multi-year process. And in order to advance in this federal process, projects must advance project design and required deliverables, be included in the region's Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as I mentioned earlier. Projects must also secure the local funding share and have a medium overall rating in the federal evaluation process. The first step in the federal process is project development, which must be completed in 2 years. And because of this deadline, a lot of project sponsors start work on projects prior to entering into the federal process. And so we have taken this approach to advance our projects with a pre-project development phase in order to be ready to move quickly in the federal pipeline. So the Red Line commuter rail project, of course, we've achieved a significant milestone this year, just last month, with the city's acquisition of the O-Line from Charlotte to Davidson, as well as securing an option for the Mooresville segment. As part of this effort, we also negotiated a comprehensive rail agreement that outlines the key terms for shared operations with Norfolk Southern. The team has also been working to update the design along with public engagement. So as part of the design update process, we've held 2 rounds of public meetings for the Red Line. The spring 2024 meetings focused on project scope and goals and demonstrated really enthusiastic support for this project. We had great participation and input in that process. And we've had, recently, we just completed another round of public meetings, and those focused on station locations, vehicle technology, and grade crossings. Again, very well attended. Our next steps will be to complete this design update with a new cost estimate early next year, and we anticipate the MTC adopting a revised locally preferred alternative with updated station locations in the spring of next year. The next phase after that will be to complete the 30% design and environmental document. And that phase will require additional funding beyond the $5 million that is currently budgeted to begin this design update. The Gold Line design study was initiated last year to update the design, evaluate ways to improve the travel time and reliability of service, as well as to confirm stop locations. For the Gold Line, we also held the first round of engagement back in the spring. That focused on gaining feedbacks on the goals as well as stop locations along the Gold Line Phase 3. The meetings were very well attended, and we received a lot of good feedback on what stops are important to people. And then next month, we plan some additional round of public meetings in 4 locations along the corridor to get some feedback on the initial recommendations for optimized stop locations. The next steps in the Gold Line study will be a technical analysis really to determine the recommended alignment, whether that's side running or median running, along with an updated cost. We anticipate the MTC adopting a refined, locally preferred alternative for the Gold Line Phase 3 in the spring. And from there, we would work to complete the 30% design and environmental document, along with continued public outreach. The Silver Line project includes both the southeast segment to Matthews as Phase A and the west segment to the airport as Phase B. The team completed 15% design on both segments in 2022 and advanced Phase A to 30% design, which is now wrapping up. There's been a lot of public and stakeholder engagement on this project throughout the study. The 30% cost estimate is currently being finalized for the southeast segment. And the next phase or steps of the Silver Line would be completing the environmental document in additional coordination with the NCDOT projects along the corridor. So this slide gives an overall picture of the project timelines in relation to the transit system plan update process. As we work to complete and confirm the goals and objectives and update the baseline assumptions for the transit system plan, the projects are completing this phase of design, doing the public engagement, as well as completing updated cost estimates. And those cost estimates are key inputs into the financial analysis to be conducted for the transit system plan update. So with that, happy to answer any questions about any of the projects. Okay. I think now we're going to take a break. We're a little ahead of schedule as well.
We are a little.
So we don't have our facilitator yet for the next discussion, but
Yeah. Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
yeah. Maybe 5 minutes?
take a break.
That's fine. 5-minute break.
5 minutes.
Or more.
How many? Oh. Okay.
We can take a longer break if people
Yeah.
want. I'm just trying to
Let's
get,
call it
not waste time.
10 minutes.
Yes, we're a democracy, so. Yeah,
We're
we'll
doing
make sure
very
you get
good on
there.
the agenda, though. We're right on time.
So this and this equal this, yet it seems like there's 3 of these things. Like this and this is what forms this. Number 2, number 3 form number 1.
That's true. But what we're trying to show is the process for the transit system plan, yes, but we're showing the whole process for transit system plan juxtaposed against as these processes for Better Bus, Silver Line, Gold Line, Red Line go forward. And so what we're really trying to say is the transit system plan will span into spring of 2025. But winter, let's call it January of 2025, is when we'll have better cost estimates on Red Line, Gold Line, Silver Line, and Better Bus. That's what she's trying to say. Now, on Red Line, those cost estimates will continue to develop as we work to refine the LPA and on goals. It's also true. Silver Line, it isn't, not because we're not doing Silver Line.
I wasn't that young, but yeah, the next
Because Silver Line is much further advanced design. And that's what she's trying to, that's what we were trying to show. Is really January is when we start to have much better information on these elements that are part of the transit system plan.
Okay.
While also showing that the transit system plan is really spring
Okay, just so that I understand, make sure I am understanding. The transit system plan in my mind, the update we're doing will include updated numbers for rail and updated numbers for bus. And that will be, and whatever we decide about that will be the updated transit system plan, right?
Nest, check on the nest.
Yeah, we're agnostic as to, so when we talk about the rapid transit corridors, we're trying to be, and so, see, red line, gold line, silver line, all serve rapid transit corridors. That's the difference between them and Better Bus.
I'm gonna get you
Better Bus
something.
doesn't
Fine,
serve
too.
a rapid
So he
transit.
told me, I talked to him last night.
It serves everywhere. And so together, they're a transit system plan. And so we're trying to stay agnostic as to the mode, how you serve transit.
But how do you have a design of a silver line if you don't rail
Well, we have rail design because we assumed up until this point it's
Just on
rail.
landscape.
And what we need to decide is whether BRT or continue to be rail, but just shortened or other things to make
Just
it.
cleaning the trees up. I've been cutting back on the, ditch on this, hauling all that shit off.
Yeah, what I
Not on the property,
Just, yeah,
the
the
roads.
right away stuff, yeah.
that we have numbers in, here's a couple questions. Can we do the silver line, but not all of it?
That doesn't include fixing the trail and all that.
You better off just hiring a, just hiring a crew.
So they, so they have a landscape.
Use the goals and objectives priorities that you give us today, and then.
Keep the ditches started mowing.
No, you're going to talk to us
Can't run
about
them more on the side.
exactly what your goals and objectives and priorities are
So
for
they
the
got,
transit system.
for one, they've got them doing it, cause just an hour, all over the rest of them.
I mean, everybody. Yeah, they're gone, yeah.
So they got them on the mountain working, so then, same thing with the guys who.
how can we give any input on our goals and objectives when we don't know what we're having, what we get for it, or what we're sacrificing?
Well, your goals and objectives should be about transit,
Like moving people to
equity, connecting,
How's it funny, just doing
15-minute headways. You see what I mean? And so they're sort of separate projects. I think it also probably helps us to establish that a bus can't be used as just money left over, everybody's left over after we do these things.
We put together a plan that we thought would be
In one place.
acceptable to, to the General Assembly, which has the
So these are slides, these are the financial slides that the
Yep.
here's where it is.
You don't always get what you want, you get what you need.
Yeah, it's just in and out too fast, yeah.
Can't do, so you can't do everything.
Like say today.
The answer is you can't, because
Fair is fair. Yeah, I would agree.
financially, there's enough money together, red line and silver line go over 40%.
Where does it, where's it?
3.7, so that's total. It would be 0.37 plus 0.07.
Since I can't.
I'm not really sure what the other ones are.
Now, the other problem,
Well, I hope she calls me out.
Bigger than everything else, but it's only like
Yeah?
that is
Gets her
true,
excited, she'll call me back.
but the reason it's so much more expensive,
She will.
I'm not worried about that.
it's cutting a brand new corridor. There's no existing corridor to use. It's being recorded and then will be made available.
Okay, but on our website saying, all public good to YouTube and watch the live stream. So
I didn't realize
I
that.
have a
Well,
lot of concerns we make plans to watch it.
yeah, I'll clarify that. It's not being live streamed, but it is being recorded and it will be put up on the site.
Okay, well, I'll check.
Yeah,
My
I'm
phone's
sorry, I
going.
didn't realize the website was
Yeah,
saying.
it's saying here, it's a meeting, and go to YouTube for watch.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay.
So I'll let everybody know.
Yeah,
Thank you. Sorry
and
to
I'll ask
interrupt.
them
Not at all.
to see if they can get it changed on the website.
That'd be great, thank you.
So.
Yeah,
He's pretty knowledgeable,
So,
too.
the first scenario, can you do everything? 6, 10, with 60%, 40, 20? The answer is no. You need, almost, you need to look at everything. The second one is, could you just do red line and silver line? Because it violates the 40%. Third one, so these are just sort of scenarios, well, what could you do? And so this one is Gold Line Phase 3, Red Line, Silver Line East, Silver Line West. And it goes over 610, so these two do work, but it assumes you move BRT, which is fine. Move Silver Line East into BRT. The other problem with this one is, it also, better bus goes from, so you have better bus.
Which I've got,
point 2 over
I
here.
just didn't do that.
But point 2 here, because it's the only bus investment. The problem is when they started adding in BRT, and it's not a problem, it's just an assumption that I don't think is correct. When they added in BRT, then better bus shrank.
Pros and cons, all of it. And
And I don't, so what I think the real scenario is, should Silver Line East and West be converted to BRT to generate more savings? And what would that do? And then the last one is the exact same thing as this one, only it assumed that there was no better.
So you stand for all that.
Agreed, and better bus, so one of the elements in jail setting that we'd like to roll out, I think Matthews, Mint Hill, the southern areas would be prime for microtransit, and that's part of better bus.
versus nothing.
And so, but, and the other part is relevant to Mint Hill.
Yeah, and make about, make back to, 3 days off and make back.
Is much more frequency on express routes. We have huge ridership potential on express because there's just, we don't have to, right?
What do you mean express, meaning like from the north to the center city? That's what you're talking
right.
about? Like you could do a lot more
Or
frequency?
From Matthews to Center City.
You're saying you could do a lot more frequency if we had more resources?
Oh, yeah, and we absolutely should. That has been cut down to 6 AM to 9 AM,
Yeah, you just gotta take somebody that plays that.
3 PM to 6 PM.
Falls is probably.
We would like to extend those hours, have middle of the day hours, and have more buses going during the hours, and you would see ridership up, I'm sure, because that is where some of the deepest cuts during COVID hit, because folks easy to
In their sleep, they'll go to.
and they just stopped riding the bus because they were working from home.
All right, well, that was 10 minutes. So,
Let me see if our facilitator is here.
all right,
You got a dozen of them.
I suspect she's not. Maybe
I just,
another
yeah,
5.
do it.
okay,
You gotta have that check with.
Okay, we need another 5.
okay,
Sorry.
no worries.
That's good. I mean, yeah, could be like it used to be, which is awful.
Maybe it's on the calendar, I don't know.
Did we ever get a decision on the charter for, on how it's written up? The Alger Sullivan Award winner is not.
I actually didn't realize that we are an hour ahead of
Correct.
schedule.
Or incorrect.
That is not a bad thing.
So I thought we were right on time, we were an hour ahead of schedule. The facilitator should be here momentarily, she's on her way.
So John doesn't need to be.
Oh, she's parking, okay, another 5 minutes.
So I'll boot him off this time. I've already told Margo, so she's not happy.
It's okay to
So this
be
is her
early.
last year too.
Should we let the folks know, like 3 PM?
Sorry, but I just, it is, yes. and it-
That's efficiency.
Well, not.
That's exactly right.
I'll never get an advisory board.
But should we let the 3:15 people know they're already?
These two, mostly, that's mostly their capital. It's mostly their capital form
On our
presentation.
advisory boards, I just got
We
the
touched
stick in
on
the
them
mud
all, and
now.
we're
It's been,
not, we don't have,
we've been on the
my
advisory board
folks sent me
10-plus years.
earlier today, I haven't even looked at them yet, the numbers that we have, but they're not.
The guy that comes in the room and takes over,
Haven't met with them.
so he just needs to stay retired.
We're not voting on anything. What are the takeaways?
Create an advisory
Section
board
that
that's
you're gonna be
just,
looking from the bottom.
I think the takeaways that we'd like to do today is, one, just inform about the transit system
recommend they join
plan.
an HOA.
Two, get your
Well,
high
it just,
level
I mean, they moved, they
thoughts,
lived in the
feelings,
ETJ,
comments about goals, objectives,
sold the property to his
priorities.
son,
And then three,
and bought a house in the neighborhood, and
as
he
we roll into
immediately
January,
took over the HOA.
will the financial
And-
That's a good, sounds like a good place for
to
them.
start having conversations about alternative scenarios.
It's an HOA
those kinds of
that
things.
doesn't want anybody
When it comes to
to do,
alternative
doesn't want,
scenarios,
doesn't have anybody
I
that
say
lives there that
that
wants to
like
do anything, so he just kind of
projects.
runs roughshod over
Not
everything.
Correct.
What was it? We tried to have a, no, it was,
So projects.
was it there? We wanted to have a
do a
commissioner
silver
chat.
line
They
in
didn't want any
rail,
political
but not
events
full line.
held there. And it was a community chat.
That was Dave's name.
Oh, it was Dave's niece, yeah.
Those kinds of things. And as we talk about it,
How's the ASC going?
what I think the bigger question is, I don't know that Better Bus
I don't
has to
really
be
know.
20%,
It's
right?
like
If it's
we
the
have a
only
new
bus
executive
investment you
director
make,
every third week or something. It just,
it has to be 20% because rail can,
I had hoped
but
this
if we
influx
said,
of money
look,
was gonna
as we think
just
about
in and of
this,
itself heal it and
could
make it
be
move forward, because I'd like to get off of
18%
it.
in certain
And
years.
Will Kybel, who's with
Better Bus
WDAV,
does- what Better Bus
would take
does
over my role. I mean,
gives
the
you
only
the
reason I got
advantage
on
that
was to try
capital
to
project
acquire
does not,
larger
is
funding from
you
the
can
county and the city.
stretch
We've done that, but I don't know what that looks like
the rest of
anymore,
the
because
capital program. Does that
the
make
rubric
sense?
changes
So
too
if you said,
much.
well, we want to
It's going
implement
good, but it's just,
all microtransit zones
I
in the next 5
still,
years.
for my life,
Have a
don't
cost.
understand
And if we looked at it and said,
why you
oh,
need a 2-hour Zoom.
maybe it'd be okay to
How they fill up
implement
2 hours every
all
time.
microtransit zones
You know,
over the next
it's
7
ASC.
years. That will then, that'll then allow cash flow
Tony is not
to projects.
running the show anymore.
So
I don't know who he is. Tony's still on
might
the
need
board.
a full 20% for Better Bus.
Somebody else, and I can't remember
The
who it
house
is for now.
census
But
is gonna continue
I
to
think I got a
slide.
meeting, I guess,
That's
coming up
right.
next week.
So is the 20% that you're referring
It's
on
getting
top of
laborious,
that?
Yes.
you know.
It's always on top of, Better Bus is always on top of what we currently spend today.
Yeah, well, I think this whole foundation in Carolinas, because the way that board's gonna be, they're gonna have 3 members of the new 12-member board are gonna be from the Foundation of Carolinas. And they do a magnificent job at raising money, but I've never seen any of their money go out anywhere.
Or you may say,
Talk about how much money they raise, but
let's take
show
that
me where you're in
5%
the
of
trenches
first
spending that money in the
and
community
utilize
somewhere, and I know they do,
fund
but,
Symphony and the.
yeah, but it's like
one of the rapid transit corridor
like
projects, and as the
the
cash flow.
Vapa Center and stuff like that.
Down,
Put some money over there, that's where it needs to be. Those are grassroots,
so as
out of their garage artists
you need a pen,
that are trying to make a living.
different alternatives
Yeah,
Do you ever go there, the Boppa Center?
To consider
We've so much art over there. There's a photographer guy over there that, you start talking, he graduates from West Charlotte the same year I graduated from North Mac.
Oh, on the other side.
Did you know David Waymer? David was at North Mac for 2 years and then transferred to West Charlotte. Played at Notre Dame and then played for the New Orleans Saints before he died of AIDS. He's like, yeah, we were best friends. I was like, no kidding. And I was able to pull up pictures of David and I when we were playing baseball together at North and everything. So he took a bunch of pictures for me and everything else, but they were, it was kind of like Hollywood pictures. There's no way. I mean, I'm like this with my shades on and everything. I was like, I would never get so pictures. No.
correct.
Not even. Now I've already done that twice with me and my Ray-Bans on the cover, so I can't do that again. So, I mean, I'm working on a new one right now. That's more a heritage album talking about my grandfather and the cotton farm they had and, you know, his place in community and stuff like that.
But
I've played with him. I played a songwriter showcase, a couple of songwriter showcases with him, but yeah, I like David a lot.
in the first
Really.
2 years.
He's such a good guy, and he's so humble, you know. He,
Vehicles we need to do it.
you know, he was, I guess a couple of months ago, he got on stage at Red Rocks with the Avets
Over 30.
and played, you know, because they've recorded about 6 of
That
his
may
songs
take
now.
4,
So,
because then we have to order vehicles.
he's just an all-around good guy, you
I
know.
was to order a vehicle today.
How did y'all work that out?
And so, as we
Okay.
think through that, I agree, if this passes, right, down the road, whenever it passes, the first thing you want to do is do everything you can fast
Yeah.
and build it up, and microtransit as well, and throw it in there, and then start thinking about the rapid transit corridors, because the rapid transit corridors.
Just want to make sure it's full screen. I can do this.
So where I live,
And have you been doing it?
That's awesome.
senior facility, and they have further down the street. See, that's what I'm talking about. We were talking about, we've got a lot of infrastructure, small things to just make sure that
Let's see.
That's
Text
right.
message from Crazy
Another
Dave.
thing you might say, right now, I think we have about 500,000 a year for shelters. You might say, look, how much could you do in a year? Because it's not 30, if we had all the money. And say, that's right, how much could you actually do? If you weren't constrained by the budget, how much could you actually do? And it's not 30, it's probably not 300, but we could start to expedite shelter improvements and bench placements and all of those
seats where you
things.
can sit down.
Right. Yeah, and all of those things can definitely be advanced and expanded and move much quicker.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I
right.
saw him
And Better Bus, because
about 3 years ago at the neighborhood
because of
theater.
the nature of it, is much more
He looked so
conducive
old,
to
but he still had all the.
You're gonna crush it.
really
Yes, I heard you.
in a very short amount of time.
What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, she's here,
Yes.
Christine's here.
I used to cover the wardable.
All right, everyone. Christine, our facilitator, is here. Kelly, oh wait, let's let Kelly pull up the presentation.
Yeah, I think it's Victoria. Just minimize your cheese. Here in the morning when I present. So Christine just got married. Yeah, and then do like present, go to, tea, she says a lot of.
Oh, I want to use the screen because I got to flip back between two.
She's their public engagement.
Full screen.
mobility localized. Kelly, do you want to go ahead and get us started and introduce
Get us
Christine?
started. Thank you,
right.
everyone, for your patience with my technology challenges here. Okay, so we're going to get started with the next session, which is to discuss the goals and objectives for the transit system plan update and to get your feedback. So we have with us today Christine Edwards to help us facilitate this discussion. And Christine is the founder of Civility Localized, a local minority and women-owned business. She is a former local government professional turned civic innovator, focused on increasing community engagement through collaboration. And Christine is part of our Transit System Update consultant team, and her role will be to help us develop and implement the public engagement plan, and so she'll also be sharing some information on that as well later on. So as we begin to discuss the goals and objectives, I just wanted to start with a reminder to think about the transit system plan as a whole, including both the bus and rail elements. This slide graphically represents how we plan to go from vision to a fiscally constrained implementation program. One of the first steps in the transit system plan update process is to confirm the goals and objectives of the plan and determine how we will measure the various alternatives, scenarios at meeting those goals and objectives. We've done a lot of work over the years on determining and developing what that vision is for the future of our region and understanding the need for transit improvements and how those transit improvements meet those goals for our community. Through this transit system plan update process, we're going to build on those previous efforts and confirm the overall goals of the transit system plan. We'll also define the specific objectives and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and from there, we will define the metrics or evaluation criteria that we'll use to compare alternative scenarios and how well they meet the objectives and what some of the trade-offs might be. This evaluation process will result in a recommendation for a fiscally constrained transit system plan that we feel best meets the objectives. As I've mentioned, the transit system plan will build on the CAT's mission and vision of moving people forward and creating a seamless transit experience. And so we have used the framework of the CAT's vision and mission to develop some proposed goals for discussion. The first proposed goal is serve our customers. Fundamentally, this goal conveys that our future transit plans should be focused on providing high-quality transit services that best meet the needs of our community. The second goal is advance economic mobility. This goal addresses the need for people across our region to be connected to opportunities that both meet their needs as well as improve their quality of life, such as access to jobs, housing, education, and services. And the final proposed goal is foster sustainability and innovation. Since Charlotte's original 2025 Transit Land Use Plan, our region has really sought to use transit to shape our future growth and support a sustainable future. And so this goal is to address the need to provide mobility choices that meet today's changing travel needs and provide options that support clean air and a healthy planet. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Christine to facilitate some discussion on the goals.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. As Kelly mentioned, my name is Christine Edwards, and I operate a community engagement consulting firm here in Charlotte. And so it's really good to just see so many familiar and some new faces, and I'm honored to be a part of the Transit System Plan as a part of their consultant team. So as y'all know, a big part of really developing this plan is getting feedback from the community and educating and informing our community about our goals, missions, and objectives. That also includes engaging our stakeholders and decision makers. So I'm going to be, as Kelly and I co-facilitate, we're going to be taking the opportunity to stop and discuss at really important intervals. And the first important interval is our goals. So if we go to the next slide, I actually have our first feedback activity. And this will kind of give you a taste of some of the different feedback activities and questions that we'll be also asking the public. So everybody here should probably have a phone with them, right? So this is the device that we're going to be using to submit your feedback. So I'm going to ask you guys to point your camera at our QR code, or you can visit slido.com, okay, and enter the code to respond to these discussion questions. All right, so thinking about our goals. All right, and y'all let me know if you're not seeing it pop up. Thinking about our goals that were presented. Looking at these goals, what resonates most with your community's needs? And are there any goals or elements of goals that are missing from the list stated here? All right, I see someone typing. I'm able to see on the back end here, folks entering their text. Right. And then if we go over to our screen, we can actually see your responses in real time. Yeah. Enter it in. There we go. Okay. We're starting to see your responses come in. Some of the responses, looking at the goals, what resonates is economic equalizer, equity in service, economic mobility, financial discipline, okay? Goals 1 and 2, which we can revisit. I'm seeing the need to connect people and places, all right? So I'm seeing, you know, if we look at some of the converging trends here, we see that equity is important to this group, economic development, economic mobility, right? Focusing on economic mobility will help ease traffic issues in Matthews. Innovation is necessary for solutions. All right, let's see if we can get a couple more responses. Really good participation, by the way. Really good participation so far. All right, let's see if we can get one more to come in. All right, innovation for the system as we move forward for customers. So I'm seeing a lot of comments that are echoing the goals that we've presented. So to me, that indicates that the goals are pretty much on target, right? And so the second part of this question is there anything missing from this list? So let's take a second to just discuss. Does anybody want to chime in on one of the comments that they see listed here or elaborate a little bit more? And if we don't get a volunteer, then I would like someone to comment on needing to connect people to places. Let's talk about the importance of that goal.
I'll go, Christine.
Sure.
I think many of us are familiar with the disparities that occurred in our city for a number of years. And in addressing that disparity, we created the program of corridors, you know, improving the corridors, because that's generally where the disengagement, where policies and federal policies, city policies left people behind. And so now we're trying to determine how do we make sure that we can move forward. And I think having a focus on both the customer and the innovation that we have. We've all sat around this table for a long time, and let me say this myself. I've sat around this table for a long time, not really understanding the value of what we can do by creating opportunities and making it easier for people to live in our communities. So I think this is really an important part of what we do. We shouldn't be going backwards. That's the thing. I think no matter what we're doing in this situation, I hope that whatever decisions we make, that we remember that we're always going to have to invest in what's going on and providing the services that people need. So when you think about like West Boulevard and the Walmart and the West Boulevard, it's Wilkinson and West Boulevard, and people are carrying grocery carts and having to shop and have those kinds of things happen, and they're walking back and forth because we have some ways that we can do it. We can actually get the people to
Right.
Walmart,
Right.
or we're gonna have to build another grocery store. Maybe we could do that before you leave, Dana.
Do our best.
Do our best. That's all we can do, I
Okay.
think, so.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles. Does anybody else want to comment on any of the responses that are posted here, or one of the responses that they might have submitted? I've seen the comment, this new comment, I listed equity in service because it is currently missing from those current goals. Okay? So we're making sure we're jotting down, we're taking notes. We want to make sure that, you know, this group feels heard when it comes to developing these set of goals as well. All right? All right, let's go back. So we have a couple more of these throughout our presentation, and we're actually going to move on to objectives.
Okay. As Christine said, we're going to talk about objectives next, and just to emphasize that we're really trying to build on our previous efforts and plans, and so we have reviewed the goals and objectives from those plans, and we have found in those plans a number of common themes, and those include, related to objectives, the need to deliver convenient, frequent, and reliable service, to improve access to work, education, and other opportunities, to facilitate better regional connectivity, encourage linkages between transportation and land use, consistent with our local plans and policies. And importantly, as we've talked a lot about, providing equitable transit for underserved and vulnerable populations. And finally, fostering sustainability and protecting the environment. And so we had a staff coordination meeting earlier this month with some of the key staff from our towns and cities, NCDOT, CRTPO, and the county, to get some initial feedback on objectives. And as a result of that discussion, there appeared to be overall support for the objectives that we've been talking about. And there were some additional comments and ideas that came out of that discussion, and are sharing here a few of the ones that were mentioned. Just to highlight a couple, the importance of ensuring coordination between different modes, including intercity rail was one of the comments. The importance of high-quality design that fits within our community, as well as the importance of reducing the number of cars on the road. So those were some of the feedback we got at the staff coordination meeting. And so here we've outlined some proposed objectives under each of the goals. And these are intended to outline some specific actions to achieve the goals. Under Serve Our Customers, the proposed objectives are provide competitive and reliable transit service. So this is capturing the importance of frequent service and faster travel times. Provide equity in service, ensuring that that we serve those who rely on transit the most. And expand area, comfort, and convenience, focusing on amenities, design, and access to transit. And then under advanced economic mobility, we have 3 proposed goals. Those are focused on ensuring that the transit system plan provides increased access to jobs, housing, education, and services, as well as increased access across the region to key destinations like downtown, the airport, special events. And finally, under the 3rd goal, foster sustainability and innovation, the proposed objectives are expand mobility choices and connectivity in innovative ways that meet our travel needs, like microtransit and ensuring connectivity between modes. Next, shape growth and sustainable development. Again, the important linkage between transit and land use policies, and ensuring that all areas of our community really can benefit from this investment in transit. And finally, foster sustainability, considering the environmental benefits as well as the potential impacts of the system plan. So now I'm going to turn it over to Christine for some additional discussion.
Absolutely. So when we talk about objectives, we're talking about specific sort of action words. You know, what are the things that we can do that are actionable? And really important here is we want to make sure that these objectives are in alignment with our stakeholders' needs and challenges. So this next discussion question for our stop and discuss is, what specific transportation needs and challenges are your communities currently facing? Okay, because we want to make sure that they are in alignment with the proposed objectives for the transit system plan. So again, if you just point your camera at the QR code, it should already be up if you have the URL open. And we want to hear from you. We want to understand what are the needs and challenges that are going on in your communities. And when we talk about objectives, again, those are those action verbs, those words, you know, like increase access, expand comfort and convenience, you know, shaping growth and equitable development, okay? So let's see, it looks like we have some folks typing. Take your time. And if we go to the screen, we can see your responses in real time. All right. Okay, we've got inadequate frequency and location placement across the county. So that's the specific challenge that's going on. And the objective would be responding to that frequency and location placement, right? Increased frequency, more convenient location placement, or adequate location placement. We have frequent access to transit services. I'm seeing we do not have enough human services transportation options. These services support the elderly and the disabled. Okay, lack of equity, need alternatives to cars, need reliable and timely service. Another challenge that's mentioned is congestion on roads. Transportation for those that don't have access to vehicles, accessibility of stops. So just, you know, and the importance of reading back and seeing back what this group is stating as challenges is very important. And it's especially important when it comes to community engagement as well. Engaging the public so the public sees their voices up and they're reflected in our planning process is very important. I'm seeing more comments: get away from mostly fixed routes, microtransit good. One of the challenges is gridlock, unaffordable transit due to high cost and managed lane, inability to move within our communities, accessibility of stops. Let's see. Awesome participation. Looks like we got 10 votes so far. Okay, so let's stop and discuss. Does anybody want to expand on one of the comments that they see up here? About specific needs, challenges. Okay. And remember, that second question is, how can we ensure objectives are in alignment? All right, hearing no volunteers, let's go into the idea of fixed routes and microtransit. I would love to just hear someone expand on that from this group, either the person that submitted this comment or would like to elaborate.
I think it probably ties into accessibility of stops. I mean, it's probably saying the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm. Providing more accessibility, responding to people's direct needs.
Yeah, microtransit would get you, closer to their house, maybe. Or
Got it.
Probably saying the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Similar to, I saw a comment about services for healthcare needs and things like that, making sure people to get to their appointments, providing more, not necessarily customized, but more specific use cases. Any other thoughts or comments on our objectives? And can we go back to the objectives page? All right. I just want to pause and just see if anyone has any comments about the objectives as they are proposed and how they align with the goals. I just want to make space for that, if anybody has anything.
Well, I do think we talked about economic mobility, and I wrote the comment about the human services transportation, because we do have a huge demand for that in Mecklenburg County, that through our program that we fund, and we don't have nearly enough money to adequately support the needs that we have. But I don't feel like the economic mobility piece really addresses sort of the human services transportation component, which is a little bit different than economic mobility. So I don't know if it would be in a different place. But I think access to people who are elderly and disabled is not adequately represented under our objectives.
Got it. Thank you.
I think it's a great comment. I think when we were thinking of it, maybe under equity and service, kind of those who need transit we need to provide, make sure we're providing that. So an aspect of that is paratransit, but valid comment.
It's not readily apparent to me when I
Yes.
read the objectives, so,
I got you. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Good. Okay.
So something I'd like to bring up, it mentions our customers. I know it's inherent in the objectives, the 3 objectives that are listed there, that you make your services more appealing, if you will, for folks, competitive, reliable, all those things, which are all good things. But what I was sitting here thinking about is, what I think we really need to do is create new customers. It's not just who currently use this service or wants to use the service, but they don't, but, folks who haven't even thought about it. That would address, I think, a lot of the congestion issues. It may address a lot of the concerns with equity and access. As Dina just mentioned, populations that aren't necessarily represented up here who haven't really thought about it. So, for me, it's an emphasis on all customers, those who haven't even thought about it. Again, new customers.
New customers.
Great comment. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that one. And that could, and it might not be super clear, but it could go under sustainability and innovation, the objective of expanding mobility choices, just expanding those options. But yeah, we could definitely make that more clear about, not only serving our existing customers, but making options for new customers as well. Okay, thank you.
I have another comment. It may be implicitly, or might be implied, but I don't think it's explicitly stated, that we should consider where the need is the greatest as to where we employ our all these things.
Got it.
So considering where the need is greatest instead of just putting it maybe where the need isn't the greatest.
Great.
All right, thank you for that. So let's go to the next. All right, and I'm just gonna keep going since, we're on a roll. So we went from broad to specific, okay? And now we wanna get into this conversation around metrics. We measure what we value. So we talk about metrics to be developed based on public and stakeholder input on goals and objectives and desired outcomes. So now we're actually going to go into this conversation around outcomes. So when it comes to outcomes, I think we asked this question to the Staff Coordination Committee, and we asked, what outcomes do you see as the most important from future transit improvements in the CAT service area? Some of the responses that we received were, for example, increased reliability, increased frequency, increased access. So when we talk about metrics, these are things that we can actually measure. Okay, so that's going to be the next question for our stop and discuss. Looking at our goals and objectives, what's the next step? What outcomes do you all want to see and should our, community see as the most important from our future transit improvements? So hold on, I need to open up that question. So now this poll is actually going to be a word cloud. You can use 1 or 2 words, so that way it'll be a little bit more impactful if you use less words. What outcomes do you want to see? And then when you enter in your responses, it'll actually show up as a word cloud, and you can select, even based on the words that are already there, you can upvote it, or you can, So put in There we go. Okay, amenities for customers, reliability, rail for all. Okay, accessibility is another big one. Change the culture of regional travel. All right. Substantive increase in ridership. You know, that gets to possibly, you know, attracting new riders and new customers. Efficacy, access, accessibility in various ways has been mentioned a lot. Reliability is being mentioned again. And I think it allows me to see how many times each, let me see, review answers. It looks like reliability has been mentioned at least 3 times. Supporting economic growth, amenities. Okay. What else? People choose to ride because it works. Efficiency, effectiveness. Okay? Rail for all. Expanded service. And you hear me reading back your responses because, again, we want to make sure that our sort of planning process is reflective of what we're hearing, okay? All right, so let's stop and discuss. From an outcome standpoint, are any of these stated outcomes resonating with you all? Any surprises here that you see? Anything that's missing?
Like in the future, you may need to look at new alternatives, new technology, obviously, not from a standpoint, I know people don't want to hear it, but, you know, robo-vans to, you know, all sorts of ideas that in the future that need to be thinking about new technology that comes available.
Absolutely, new technology. Change the culture of regional travel. I think that's the first culture comment that I'm seeing in you know, in today's conversation since I've been here. That's an interesting idea. Okay. Culture, increase ridership, efficiency, effectiveness. Does anybody want to talk more about efficiency, effectiveness? That's one that I see a few times up here.
Well, it shouldn't take you so, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, about the 60-minute ride versus a 30-minute ride versus, so, you know, theoretically, you should be able to get where you need to go quicker than you can get there today. I mean,
Absolutely.
if it takes you longer, then it's not really efficient.
Go, yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Any more reflections on this particular activity before we move on? Or the responses that you see? All right, let's move forward. Okay, so thank you guys. Thank you all for participating in that feedback activity. That kind of gives you a taste or an idea of some of the strategies that we'll be implementing throughout our engagement. So let me talk a bit more about what public engagement is, what we're proposing it may look like for this project. Thank you. Oops, is that me? Yeah, let's just use the.
We should be able to
Yeah,
click forward.
Yeah, that was great, thank you. Okay, so our public engagement goals, as you all may be familiar with, public engagement truly is on a spectrum. We want to make sure that we clearly define the public's role in decision-making, and so we're proposing that we inform the public, consult the public, and involve the public. Informing them includes providing them with a balanced and objective information, so that's education and awareness through tools and activities. Consult the public includes obtaining feedback, getting their feedback on our goals and objectives and outcomes that may come in the form of a survey. And then involve. We want to make sure that we're involving the public and ensuring that their concerns and aspirations are understood and heard throughout. So that is a level that we're proposing to engage the public. We want to make sure that we have broad and diverse participation, you know, making sure that we look at the CAT service area and understanding, you know, the diversity of the, you know, of our area to make sure that we're receiving a representative participation in our project. meaningful input opportunities, which could include a number of tools that we'll mention here in a moment. And then, of course, just clear messaging, just making sure that people understand what a transit system plan is and what it is proposing to accomplish. Okay, some of our engagement strategies include having a phased approach with 3 different rounds. You know, we'll have a round where we'll go over goals and objectives. Then the next round will be alternative scenarios, and then of course we'll come back out to the public with some recommendations. Some of the strategies could include virtual and in-person meetings located throughout Mecklenburg County. Plugging into our current projects and programs, including the community area planning, plugging into those existing project meetings such as Better Bus, the Red Line, the Gold Line, public engagement activities which are going on now. Plugging into our council district town halls and meeting with Mecklenburg County, meeting at town meetings and engaging our municipal stakeholders. It's going to be very important. Stakeholder meetings, including business organizations, neighborhood associations, and even the ETOD coalition. So we're going to be bringing this information out into the community, engaging with a number of folks. And I'll just take a second to say that I'm happy to be a part of this project because I do have an understanding of what's going on in Charlotte and in Mecklenburg County, specifically as it relates to some of the, public sector plans and opportunities. So I'll be able to connect those things together. That's my hope anyway, as a part of this consultant team. Monthly meetings with the staff coordination team, city and town managers, planning organizations, including this group, the MTC. Making sure that CATS and the leadership team is providing regular briefings. And there also will be online opportunities like a public survey, website, social media, and email as opportunities for people to share their feedback with us. And last but not least, we definitely want to provide multilingual options so that the public can, engage in the language that's most needed, whether through our handouts and website or through live translation services.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On your public engagement, how come there's no engagement concerning the Silver Line?
That might be an oversight on just a typo.
On the project teams. So it's simply what engagement do we have going on right now with the projects? And, but certainly engagement on the Silver Line would be part of these public meetings for the transit system plan update.
All right, great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. And this is a strategy or a tactic called graphic facilitation. And so this idea was proposed by members of our consultant team to bring in a facilitator that can actually visualize what we're hearing. They can visualize it live, through these interesting graphics and visualizations. And sometimes it's just good to have something that you can see and hold. So this is an idea. We really want to bring some innovation to our public engagement activities. So that could be included. And then, of course, our next steps, we are working with CATS and we're working with Kelly to develop our final public engagement plan. The website is slated to go live fall 2024. Our community survey is also slated to go live fall 2024. And we will get started with really looking at neighborhood and community outreach, where we're going to be identifying neighborhood meetings that are currently taking place or neighborhoods that are currently activated and engaged, and coming up with a stakeholder engagement plan and a database of contacts that we can get plugged into. And I think that is it as far as our public engagement plan, and thank you very much.
Christine, quick question. So the website live fall of 2024, community survey fall of 2024, are we not in the fall of 2024 right now? Okay.
I think that's happening really quickly. It's happening as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah, it's under development. We're trying to get that going and up as soon as possible.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
So when you all talk about stakeholder engagement, were you you reach out to the towns to see if we have any recommendations for you all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the roles that we want the staff coordination team to fill as well, is kind of getting connected to your public information officers and make sure we're utilizing all the information you have about how to reach out to your community. So definitely, thank you. Well, we really appreciate MTC members participating in the facilitated discussion and using this kind of new technique, online engagement, that helped us kind of test that tool and see how well it works, and really appreciate all of that feedback as well. And so we will be out, as we mentioned, getting some additional feedback on these goals and objectives, and then we'll be coming back to you with kind of a final recommendation on those goals and objectives in the new year.
So just so I'm clear then, how is this engagement work going to be folded into the development of the plan,
In the development of the, I'm sorry, missed the last.
of the transit system plan? So we're going to do engagement, we don't do it for the sake of doing it, we do it so that we can really incorporate the feedback. So how is all of this going to be incorporated into the development of the plan?
Yeah, I think the intention is to kind of do it during the rounds. So, in this first round engagement, we'll get some feedback on these goals and objectives, and that may lead us to emphasize one thing or another. There might be something missing that we need to capture from the public or the stakeholder engagement, right? And then when we develop alternative scenarios, then we're going to go out with that information as well, and how the evaluation of those different scenarios came out, to get public feedback on what their priorities or what their reaction is to those alternative scenarios. And that will result in a recommendation. And again, when we have a recommended plan, we'll go out to the public and get some additional feedback on those recommendations, and that could result in a change that will bring that information we gain from that public involvement process to the MTC, so the MTC can also feed that into your decision matrix.
Well, to follow up on that question, it seems like we can't really get into this very deeply until we know if and what any legislation is allowing us to do. Because we're getting feedback on something that we don't know for a fact that what it is. And so I'm sort of wondering on the timing of beginning to do this work while we're waiting to hear from the General Assembly.
Yeah,
I think I think there are a couple issues with the draft legislation. Will the General Assembly approve it as drafted? Would they make changes? Would they just plain not approve it? I think there are question marks there, but if we utilize what we have, the draft legislation, that enables us to start the process. If we do not start, we certainly run the risk of missing the window as we're moving forward on the transit system plan update and lining it up with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as well as possible referendum.
Okay, so when you talk about it to the public, is my understanding that you would be proceeding along the lines of the draft legislation with an asterisk?
yes, that would be part of the base assumptions in the financial
Okay.
analysis, is the proposed sales tax legislation.
Well, yeah, I certainly don't want us to not begin the hard work. We do have to time it. So I appreciate the thinking around how to make progress while we're still, in some preliminary stages, so thank you.
Can I add one thing? I think that engagement also, sometimes it can serve the purpose of awareness and communication. And so this idea of, okay, we're engaging the public, but we're also making folks aware, that this is a plan that is sort of in motion. And so I think that increased transparency, I'll say, I think kind of helps to get that community buy-in along the way, or even just community awareness along the way. So I think it does serve that purpose before you even get into that conversation.
I also will say, I think the community engagement from stakeholders is one of those evergreen activities. We've done a lot to get us to where we are, and doing it now, starting it now, it will help us make decisions about alternatives and trade-offs, regardless of sort of what final form the legislation, if it were to pass, would look like, right? And so we know that as we go through this, assuming that the transit system plan will continue to need to be updated because it's not fiscally constrained, because the new revenue does not meet, does not provide enough to do all of the transit system plan. Regardless of how those final numbers come out, this provides a framework to create a decision matrix for the MTC to have an informed decision-making when we have to make those alternatives. I think you might remember on a smaller scale when 2 years ago, I think it was about 2 years ago, the Silver Line Uptown LPA, as the MTC evaluated that, we did look at the different priorities, right? And the MTC saw what those priorities were and used those priorities to make an ultimate decision on just that one piece of LPA. This is much bigger than that, but a very similar process as we start to think about alternatives and trade-offs, which we will have to do in this process to get to a fiscally constrained transit system plan.
Thank you. All right, is that the end of your presentation? I'm told we have snacks, always a good thing. So we'll take just a 5-10 minute break and then go into our last part of this. Thank you.
And then if you need parking validation, Paula is here to give you your sticker, so.
Add for you chocolate chip cookies.
I was gonna say chocolate would be good right about now.
Just what I need. We put a pool in, so that's gonna be my weight loss. Yeah.
Not swimming?
Let's go see the heat the pool up, but, so now I just sit.
Did you just finish it?
Yeah.
So you have next year.
Well, we got it in about 6 days and that was it. And then,
Well, you can't control
It's gonna be warm.
But
Once you figure it out, please.
we live.
Well, that's good.
Gorgeous.
We live in that's a hot tub. So it's the hot tub 5 feet by 10 feet. And then the pool's 12
she
by
gets-
22. We did all travertine.
That's
My wife
gorgeous.
designed it,
Yeah.
I bet you do.
but there's no exercising.
Yeah.
Sit there and drink bourbon.
And so many don't.
And I get it
Very smart man.
every night. You know, it's
Did you invite Jamie over?
no. No, we're
I want to
hosting.
know if he invited you over to sit in his hot tub.
Oh, no, he has not done that. I think he's scared.
There's a bigger picture of it.
That is spectacular.
I know. So we had a family beach house for 37 years.
Where?
Ocean Island. And about 7 years ago, after my mother died, my siblings outvoted me and we sold it. Now, I should have bought it, but I didn't. And we've been trying to get back to Ocean Island. It's $1 million to go on the island. And that's kind of material. I'm like, screw it. So we spent $150,000 on the pool. And
More cost effective.
we'll go to the beach somewhere. We don't have to go to Ocean Island. Just rent an oceanfront for $10 grand for the week and, have all the kids come.
That's what we just did for going home for 2 weeks in
Yeah.
August. It's gonna take
But this is-
but we've got a couple that sleeps well.
Yeah, and see, this works out better for us because my grandkids, I've got one here. They come, they were able to come over before it got too cold, and you don't winterize this, so we just keep the water in it. But, it's just the best decision.
Yeah, I like it.
You're so lucky that you have the land to do it.
Well, there were, of the 28 penthouses in our neighborhood, and 18 townhomes. It's just a little bit. And only 4 of the houses actually have yards that could have a pool. And we did it, you know, and the neighbors hate me because we were those people that had construction going on all the time. It's the best thing we did. It's enjoyable, and you know, we were in this shithole of a house on North Main Street trying to buy on the lady. Finally, came time to, let's do it. She tripled the price on me. So
She knew who you were and all
it didn't
that.
matter. I've known her for 40 years, Kayla, so I just said, screw it, you know. We settled on Mom's estate. I was like, we got $1.5 million in the bank. You're not renting anymore. We're out. So we were out within 30 days. We found that one and closed on it in 3 weeks.
That's awesome.
And so, you know, that's...
Now it's where you want to be.
We don't move. We stay. I mean, literally, I drink my coffee in the morning, sitting out back, because there's nothing behind us. We're about 400 feet off East Rocky River Road, but we're on a bluff, so we sit about 60 feet above the river and above the road.
Yeah.
So we do hear cars, but we don't see anything.
Yeah.
And we just sit there, all we look at the streets, and literally right on the other side of the fence, it goes like this. River Run owns it.
Oh, okay.
So we're in what's called the Summit at River Run. It's just a little pocket neighborhood that was part of the original master plan. And, you know, it'll never be developed. It's unbuildable, and it's floodplain behind us. So we're dying there. I mean, I'm sorry, but you know,
We're dying there.
we
Sounds
still
good.
we still go. I mean, our anniversary is the 17th of November, so we're going to Charleston for 5 days. Then we're going to Esmeralda, somewhere in Florida.
Alamorada.
Yeah.
Alamorada. It's
We're going
right
there
up by the Keys.
next week.
Yeah.
We got a girlfriend that moved down there. She had a son that died in a car wreck, and she just didn't want to be in Dayton. They're empty nesters, so they just moved. So we're going down there the 7th.
It's pretty down there. My husband and I go to Key West every Christmas.
Yeah, I've gone to Key West
Yeah,
a
it's
bunch.
fun.
Key West has changed, but it's still
It's still
It's a
funky,
place to get-
weird.
yeah.
We like it. We totally like it. So,
well, we've got friends that live in Tampa. We go see a lot too. It's just a different
did
side of the state.
they get through the hurricane?
No, they lost everything in the first. They took all the valuables, the photo albums and everything else, and moved most of it to the 2nd floor. But they had 6 feet of water in their house. It was just sad, and you see videos now of alligators in people's backyards and everything. They're real. It's not.
That's not fake.
Posed,
I know
yeah.
that. All right, I'm gonna go get a snack.
Yeah, I might as
Be
well
awake for the rest of the day.
Whatever a snack
This is
might
where
be.
the fun part begins. This is where we do the fun stuff.
Can you hold my attention with my ADD as long as I get snacks?
Fair enough.
Mr. Welch getting a couple, new bowl of rice.
Are you talking new bowl of rice?
Come on, man.
I know.
That'll be good for you.
Those are the snacks next door.
Yeah, right, better
I
go get
think I'll
some.
go next door then.
Better get some cookies, the cookies back there. Yeah, I think, I can't remember whether you were telling me.
It's when we had lunch.
That's right. That's today, huh? Nice. Hey, if they want 'em. Go for it, right?
IT.
Been crushing the water.
Make myself feel good about eating that cookie, by getting some fruit on the side.
What's that?
These chairs, when you stand up, they pop up, and if they're under the table,
Oh,
everything.
it knocks you, yeah.
Everything pops. So, we're doing really well on time.
Yep.
And we, just as a note, for the November meeting, several hours, we need that. So November meeting is always earlier because of CRTPO at Thanksgiving, but we'll adjust that down to be a normal meeting.
Early in the month or earlier in the day?
A little bit earlier in the month, and then because it then coincides with CRTPO, we start around 3:30.
Great, thank you. You're welcome.
So the CRTPO starts at what, 6?
Okay.
So usually we start between 3:30, 4 o'clock, depending on the agenda. So we'll adjust that calendar invite to reflect it. But we know that's one of the nights, we try to avoid them, but that's one of the nights where MTC and CRTPO fall in the same evening. And so we'll try to look at the agenda and figure out how we can make it seamless.
Right. Currently, it says 12 to 5 MTC on.
And it will, we
Won't
won't
be
be
that
at 9 to 5.
And then December, Vi takes over, right?
She does, and we normally don't have a December meeting again because of the holidays. And so that sort of drives us into January with the new model or the updated model and really kicking off the part of the TSP.
All right, so really, after day, it's just one meeting.
Yes. Yeah, and next month will be sort of business items. We have the agency safety plan. You may remember last year, we updated, there were revisions to the ASP. Those happen every year. So we'll have the ASP next month.
Try to make it as late as possible.
So I'm talking to CRTPO early, but they don't need GMTC to vote. You're free to sign it. So I will have Emily get you a copy for signature.
Do you want to have her bring that down while I'm here today?
Let me see.
I mean, I'll be here like next Tuesday, but.
Yeah, or she can email it to you.
But then there's a problem of like electronic signature. If she's around, it'd be good to just knock it out.
Okay, yeah. Let me go see if I can round her up and bring the copy down. Hey, Brad.
How you doing?
Good, how you doing?
You feeling better?
Yeah. I'm ready to start exercising. Go back to the gym tomorrow.
Cool.
Yes, especially after those delicious cookies.
Find out, right?
Yeah.
She said she's good to go.
Sure they're healthy. They baked all the calories out of them.
She'll sign it even. It's more convenient. One day only kind of deal.
Right, well.
I think we are ready if
All right,
you are.
yeah. All right, let's go ahead and kick off this last section here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great, we are in the home stretch on the transit system plan update. This section is dedicated to talking about the baseline financial assumptions and the financial model. Ms. Goforth is joined by Sharon and John with InfraStrategies, so I'll turn it over to them to dive right in.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Jonathan Ravenel. I'm a senior consultant with InfraStrategies, joined with Sharon Green, partner at InfraStrategies.
Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, put a little
Okay.
closer.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. This afternoon we'll be covering the transit system plan update in regards to the financial modeling work that will be done and going through some baseline financial assumptions as well as the process associated with the transit financial model. So as I just mentioned, we're looking to review the financial modeling process for the TSP development and touch on some critical baseline assumptions within the financial model that will be key drivers for the transit system plan update. We'll review the financial planning team that isn't with you from InfraStrategies today, some of the financial modeling work that's been completed to date, presented to the managers, touch on how the assumptions work together so you understand some of the context within the model and what some of the key drivers are in terms of what gets to specific outputs from the model. And then we'll review some of the proposed updates to existing baseline model assumptions, and then touch on some ongoing work that we're actively doing and next steps as we move forward with the TSP update process. So InfraStrategies, we're a national firm, small business with presence on the East Coast and the West Coast. No presence yet in the middle of the country, but I'm sure we'll get there. We've been in operation or business for 6 years, and we've been really fortunate to partner with over 70 clients in those first 6 years of operations. And a lot of what we do is exactly what we're presenting to you today. We do a lot of financial modeling work. We work a lot with transit agencies, local governments, looking to put forward referenda to voters for transportation and transit programs specifically. On our financial team, I'm, as I said, joined by Sharon Green, who doesn't want to admit it, but has been doing this longer than I've been alive in terms of developing financial programs for transit agencies. She has a wide range of expertise and depth of knowledge in terms of transit funding and finance in the industry. Carolyn Flowers, who many of you may know, is on our team as well. She is a partner with InfraStrategies, former acting FTA administrator, former CEO of CATS, among other notable positions that she's had in the industry. Sophie Guinea, who's also a partner, she leads our modeling team with Sharon. She has expertise with transit agencies across the country. She's worked directly for USDOT in terms of analyzing TIFIA loan applications and has analyzed CIG grant applications and puts those together regularly for a lot of clients nationally. Myself, I'm fairly new to InfraStrategy, started in February. Prior to that, I was in the Regional Transit Authority putting together financial strategies for Atlanta, the city that you all like to compete with, and so have a lot of experience with these types of plans. And then David Boyer, who's another senior consultant, has over 10 years of public and private sector experience in financial planning and analysis. So before we jump into the TSP update process in regards to the financial model, just want to touch on kind of the work that's been done to date. InfraStrategies has been engaged since 2021 to work on this type of financial modeling, and didn't want to miss the opportunity to highlight what's been done. So the financial model is developed using what's called the FAST standards. It's an international standard, stands for flexible, appropriate, structured, and transparent. It's used across the world to develop both transit programs as well as other types of programs for utility projects, tolling projects, any really sort of infrastructure project. This standard and structure really allows for transparent use across different modelers and is a critical tool that allows you to test different scenarios as well as different sensitivities of elements that are being input into the model. The model that we've developed as a baseline has been coordinated with the City of Charlotte's financial advisor, Davenport, regarding financing assessments, as they are a municipal financial advisor. And so it's been a tandem approach in terms of InfraStrategies and Davenport and working to develop some of the outputs that have been seen to date. A lot of the work has been around developing a preliminary financial model that really tried to understand at scale what was achievable at different levels of new sales tax, different thresholds, looking at different funding allocation mixes between transportation, transit, and a lot of the latest model runs you saw in May, or the managers saw in May, represented that. This is a standard process that we see on a national basis. We have at least 4 clients that are going to the ballot in November that went through a very similar process to get to transportation referendums where you have both transit as well as other modes on the ballot. So this iterative model process where you look at a high level what share can fit certain levels of a program is fairly standard across the country. This slide was presented to the managers in May and really demonstrates, based on that preliminary information that we looked at the time, if you looked at all project costs in 2027 dollars, so not escalating for inflation, just looking at it in 2027, what is the scope and scale of the program based on the cost estimates at the time that are feeding the model? And at that point, it was $11.5 billion in terms of capital, and then on an annual operating and maintenance basis, it was $195 million. Note, though, that from the previous presentations you saw earlier, a lot of these projects are in the development process, and so we're about to get a lot more information in terms of these project costs, which are really critical to getting the detail and information that I think the MTC and CATS needs in order to make a refined decision in terms of what to move forward with the TSP. And so really, it's critical to have these updated cost estimates, this updated information in terms of project scope, as we look to make updates to the model moving forward. Also presented to the managers in May were a variety of scenarios that were tested, and I just wanted to highlight them here so that the MTC could see kind of the scope of what scenario testing with the financial model looked like. And the scenarios range from what at the time did it take in terms of sales tax threshold to build the entirety of the program, and at the time, based on those cost estimates, it was 0.9% or 90%, 90 cents of the penny. Looking at other alternatives in terms of if we escalate or try to deliver things in a shorter time frame of 20 years, what can we build? And then looking at other alternatives in terms of modes and cost shares, et cetera. And then it was also presented to the managers and requested to look at, can the red line as well as the silver line east segment be delivered under a 0.4% rail cap? And based on the analysis that the InfraStrategies team has done, looking at it exhaustively, the definitive answer is that under a 0.4% rail cap, the numbers just don't bear it out in terms of being able to support both the red line and the silver line east in terms of a light rail project based on the cost estimates that are currently being used in the model. So again, just wanted to highlight some of the previous work that's been done and that was presented to the mayors in May, or excuse me, the managers in May, as we move forward now into the transit system plan update. And I really think today you've seen a good breadth of the opportunity that the MTC and CATS has ahead of it in terms of really developing a network that really feeds together and builds out a system that can best serve customers throughout the region. As opposed to looking at individual projects, it's important to look at how each of those projects impacts the overall system and customers as a whole. So in terms of where we are right now, as it was mentioned earlier, it is fall of 2024, and so we are actively working on a lot of these elements. We're reviewing and updating some of the baseline assumptions, looking at federal formula funding, other federal funding, such as what's called FHWA flex funding that comes from the MPO, discretionary federal funding, looking at fare box recovery rates, both for existing modes as well as potential new modes, in order to inform how much fare revenue we could expect to receive, as well as looking at cost allocation to better determine costs from an administrative perspective as new projects come online.
Excuse me, is it appropriate now to talk about the models, or we need to wait to the end of the entire presentation?
Let's let them get through it, just because.
Okay, because it seems like it's going in another direction away from the models, but we can come back to it.
So we'll also, as was presented earlier by Kelly, finalizing some of the program and project inputs, which are critical in terms of updating the model from a preliminary phase that was completed in May to where we really need to be to adopt the TSP update in spring of 2025. So looking at the Better Bus program, what is that defined network that is prioritized as Jason presented earlier, looking at some of the updates in terms of the high capacity project costs and the phasing, and then supporting facilities, Charlotte Gateway Station, CTC, and then the future state of good repair of that program, making sure that if you build it, you can also maintain it over the long run, because that's a critical aspect as well. And then finally, integrating both the transit system plan model with some of the existing Article 43 financial model that Chad and his team work on, to make sure that they, to a certain extent, are speaking to each other, and that we're looking at it holistically as a CATS program, and that one isn't out of balance with the other. And then in the winter, we anticipate running constrained scenario testing, looking at, based on funding levels, what are the projects that are able to be funded through various scenarios that are evaluated not just on a financial basis, but also on a programmatic and a performance basis in terms of what it means for the customer as well. And then finally, in late spring of 2025, looking to finalize that fiscally constrained TSP scenario for this transit system plan. And really the goal here is to develop a program that's fiscally constrained and that it's realistic and implementable. I've been in Atlanta for 13 years now, and we've had votes in 2014 and 2016, and nothing has been built, and we are in 2024. And that's because programs were voted on that weren't constrained and they weren't prioritized. And we are still struggling with constraining those programs and prioritizing them today. So I want to applaud the work that you are doing here in Mecklenburg County and the Charlotte region to really prioritize and program in a financially constrained way based on the best information available these types of programs before you even get to a potential referendum, because I think it's pivotal not just to the success of the referendum, but also to the success of the program following a successful referendum. And then I think it's also important to note, and was noted on the slides that was presented to the managers in May of 2024, that this plan will need to be updated over time. The financial realities will adjust, and the financial model will need to be adjusted accordingly as well. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
And so, you know, as projects go from the pre-project development phase to the project development phase and engineering and construction, those project costs will need to be updated, and again, some refinements will need to be made over time.
Thank you. Mayor Higdon?
Yeah, okay, I had a few comments on the models, and I have a few comments and a few questions. First, I'm reminded that Ms. Edwards came here and the name of her company was Civility Localized, so I'm going to try really hard to be civil. I respect everybody on the MTC and everybody in this room, but I'm very passionate about this issue, as are the people I represent in Matthews. Matthews is very much concerned about the current course of action because we have been offered no compromise whatsoever. We've had lawyers from the town that worked with the managers come to my office and tell us under no uncertain terms we're going to get BRT, we better get used to liking it because that's what we're going to get. I've shared with this group that as early as Christmas time in 1994, so nearly 30 years ago, I attended a Christmas party and discussed the potential of light rail in Matthews 30 years ago with a gentleman that later became mayor before I was. I want to remind this group that the 40-40-20 allocation is absolutely not mandated by the legislature. Only that roads are prioritized first. That's it. There's no 40-40-20 mandate. So a couple questions I have. I requested that some other funding models be run that might have a different outcome. And if you look at page 5 in the presentation today, one of the models I would like to look at is a 49-40-11 model, 49 for transit, 40 for roads, and 11 for buses. And it appears that the model that was run in May indicates that a 50% allocation for transit, which is pretty close to 49, could fully fund the Red Line, the Silver Line, and Better Bus. So I think other scenarios should be looked at. And I'm concerned that I've been told that we have to wait till January to run different models because I think that'll be too late. We're going to be going to the legislature at that point. And I think just hemming us in to a 40-40-20 model is not going to deliver a community consensus plan. You're probably aware that we had a transit summit this past weekend, and I should let you know that there were lots of community leaders, not only from Matthews, but from East Charlotte, including HOA and community leaders from Echo Hills and Oakhurst, folks from Charlotte East and Monroe Road advocates, and they share Matthews' concern. They absolutely do not want bus rapid transit. They desire rail, which we've been promised for decades. So the couple questions I have, number one, is January too late? I think it is. And if the current model that was run in May was sufficient to justify the 40-40-20 plan that all the towns voted on, then why can't it be used now to test other scenarios? After all, it's the basis for what we delivered our draft legislation and voted on it. So that's my first question. My second question is, if this legislation doesn't pass, what's our backup plan, particularly for Better Bus and for public transit? Matthews absolutely wants to be part of the solution. We want to join the rest of the county and support a plan that delivers a community consensus plan for the whole region. And so those are my questions. I believe January's too late. Why can't we run other model scenarios now and consider them? And secondly, what's our backup plan? If this legislation fails, then what's our next step?
Yeah, Mayor Higdon, let me talk a little bit to why January. So beyond running different funding splits, 40-40-20, or some other variation of funding split, the other side of the modeling needs to look at just simple financial feasibility in May when these were run, and so not looking on page 5, but not looking at slide 10, looking at slide 9, I have serious concerns about slide 9 in general. And so the answer to why January is, when you look at the capital cost by project, in January, we will have much better capital estimates for the gold line and the red line, especially the red line because it is a must-complete project under the draft legislation. And when I say we'll have better numbers, those numbers are not likely to go down. They will increase. And that will affect, even if we were to rerun with those new numbers, the exact same scenarios, you will get different results, maybe vastly or materially different. And so what we're asking for is the time needed to better populate the project costs. That's the first thing. The second thing, when I look at slide 9, as the project costs increase, we also have serious concerns that the annual operating costs need to be increased. And as we start to gather that information, both of those columns get updated, and that will result, or likely will result, in material differences or changes in the results of the modeling. And then the last thing I'll say about slide 9 and slide 10, in slide 9, you'll note that the annual operating cost of Better Bus is $77 million. That's in slide 9. That is more than 20% of annual revenues associated with the proposed funding split 40-40-20. 77 million, roughly 20% in year 1, is roughly 69 million. So it's a little more than 20%, but it's certainly not less than 20%. The model, however, and you'll note this, when you look at Better Bus, the reason the percentages for Better Bus change is because the model assumed that Better Bus would be funded to the level with dollars left over after rapid transit corridors were served. It became whatever money is left after rapid transit corridors are served, that's what will be left for Better Bus. And as we talk about Better Bus, I think rather than a passive decision about funding for bus, the MTC and the public needs to actively engage in conversations about how much we want to invest in our fixed route and microtransit in Better Bus in general. And these models did not do that. They assumed Better Bus was just whatever funding was left after the rapid transit corridors were funded in whatever mode it was. And in some of these models, the rapid transit corridors were served with BRT. In some that they were not. But the assumption remains the same, that Better Bus is just what's left over after rapid transit corridors are served. And that, I think, warrants an active discussion and decision on behalf of the public and the MTC before the assumption is bus is just relegated to whatever's left.
Are we going to have opportunities to run other models before this legislation is presented to the legislature?
I do not know when the legislation is being presented to the legislature.
Well, I would like to ask that we do have the opportunity to run other models, because that's only fair. If we have to wait 3 months to use the software, I would like to have, this is a 50 to 100-year decision. I think we owe it to the people that live in Matthews and East Charlotte to run other models to see if there's other outcomes that are possible.
Yeah, the other thing I will point out is, I think you have asked an excellent question, and I'm going to paraphrase it, so if I get it wrong, correct me. Rather than thinking about the Silver Line as BRT, how much Silver Line could be delivered as rail? I think that's an excellent question, and as we update these numbers, we will be prepared to talk to you about, is there an amount of Silver Line and how much Silver Line could be delivered, even if it's not the full alignment. Because the other thing that these models did, or these scenarios did, is they assumed that all projects remained equal other than Better Bus. So there was not an active discussion about well, this is how much Silverline we could do, but it may require a trade-off in another area. And that's what we're proposing. That is a normal part of the process, both for the MTC and then the public to weigh in on. And what I'm trying to ask is that we have the best project cost information we possibly can and the best operations and maintenance costs we possibly can have in the model before we do that. Because if we were to do that today, you are correct, it could be done today. But we may get to January and find that all of those things, solutions or alternatives that we identified, are no longer feasible because these are key assumptions. They drive everything in the model. It's the cost of the program. And we may spend time thinking we have a solution only to find out in January we absolutely do not.
Well, I was asked the question numerous times this weekend why we had draft legislation urgently sent to the towns to vote on with a 40-40-20 allocation when we don't know what it's going to pay for. That seems like putting the cart before the horse, I think, a little bit. But I do want to make one other comment. There is absolutely, I want to make this crystal clear, no intent whatsoever by any of my efforts or the folks in Matthews or East Charlotte to derail the intent to build the red line first as a #1 priority. Amen. I've supported that before. I continue to support it. So we're not trying to mess up the red line. That's not at all the intent. We fully support the red line being built first and being prioritized.
Thank you.
So now we'll touch on some of the context around the financial models assumptions and how different elements really drive key outputs from the model. And you can see that there's different components. There's economic components that to a certain extent are independent of anything in the control of any of us. And then there's project-related and service-related drivers that, depending on how you toggle or increase or decrease those elements, they have trickle-down effects both on the revenue and the cost side. So each assumption has an impact, but understanding the significance of these assumptions really helps develop a program that's both conservative and implementable. On the project and service drivers, from the revenue perspective, the FTA CIG program shares or the assumptions around how much FTA will contribute to your major capital expansion projects or the core capacity project with the blue line is really a key driver and to a certain extent dependent upon the overall project costs there. Other federal discretionary grants, I mentioned earlier, raised grants, bus and bus facilities for fleet replacements, FTA formula funds. Some of the updates to the project information we'll be receiving will actually allow us to get us more fine-tuned or more detailed with some of the federal formula funding assumptions we'll be putting into the model, which I think is a positive development there. And then fare box recovery, making sure that the recovery levels are appropriate to the mode that's being assumed. From a cost perspective, obviously the project cost estimates are the key driver there. It's important that as the projects are early in the planning process, in the pre-project development process, that we assume some level of reserves there or some level of reserves for the project costs. FTA is going to require that as they go through the CIG process as well. Contingency to those projects as well. Cost of operations, that is a critical driver because that's an annual cost that inflates on an annual basis. And so making sure we have the best information available for those costs of operations is key. And then project phasing is another important element. Obviously, the more a project waits, the more expensive it gets. And state of good repair. If you build it, making sure that you can maintain it. On the revenue side, some of the economic drivers that really drive the sales tax growth rate, you'll see in a few slides what we're recommending, which is consistent with the existing model and the trends we've seen, as well as sales tax splits associated with what share potentially goes to transit versus transportation. And then economic drivers in terms of cost. What is the financing cost that will evolve over time with interest rates as well as inflation and cost escalation, and then making sure we're protecting cats in the city as well as the region through debt service coverage ratio, making sure there's enough coverage there to support the debt that's being taken out. From a federal funding perspective, Kelly mentioned earlier, and I really want to applaud CATS for some of this pre-project development process before even entering CIG. You don't always see that with transit agencies, and I think it's a really good thing that CATS is doing that. It prepares you to be expeditious in the CIG process, and that's really critical as you move forward. From the CIG program, what we've seen, this dot chart shows CIG projects that have been awarded that had an overall project cost of greater than $1 billion since 2014. And we've seen the majority of those projects receive between a 40% and a 50% CIG share. So FTA will cover between 40 and 50% of the overall project cost for those. However, there's really a split point at about $3 billion in terms of how much federal share or CIG share FTA is willing to contribute to a project. And we've seen that if your project is $3 billion in total project costs, they generally shade towards 40% share of CIG funding. But for those projects that are less than $3 billion, as you can see on the left side of the vertical line, you're anywhere between 45 and 50%. And so only one project since 2014 has received a full funding grant agreement from FTA that had a 45%, greater than 45% CIG share that was over that $3 billion threshold. That was the Hudson Tunnel project. It was almost $15 billion, and it was kind of a one-of-a-kind type project. Second Ave subway in New York also came close with 44%. And then Transbay Downtown Rail Extension is at 41%. So yes, it's over that 40%, but it's still in the project development process with FTA. It has not been awarded a full funding grant agreement. And what we're seeing based on our experience nationally is a lot of these shares shifting to that 40% for these mega CIG projects of $3 billion and more in cost.
It was that most of them would come in at 49.4%, because FTA said if you have a share under 50%, you'll get a +1 up on your rating when they rate the projects. And so everyone was coming in at 49.4%, because it rounded to 49 as opposed to 50. And everyone has been cut. I can tell you, I do the financial plan for the Transbay Terminal project that's shown there as 41. It's 41 now, and probably will go down. We started at 49.4. So.
From a timing perspective, it's really critical. Potential referendum is really critical because the sooner you have that dedicated local funding commitment and can engage FTA in that CIG process, the sooner you can get in that pipeline and compete for these CIG dollars. And it was mentioned during the panel, keeping Charlotte a world-class city, and transit's a critical component to that. And so these dollars helping to expand the system are critical to doing that, and getting into that pipeline is necessary. But there is also a lot of competition right now. And so as the program is refined, making sure that projects are developed in such a way as they've been to ensure that they're as competitive as possible for these CIG funds will be critical.
Since CIG is such a major share of the federal funding for the program, I'll just make two observations to amplify what John is saying. I should talk into the microphone, I'm sorry. I'll just amplify some of the things that John has said. If we often have a chart that lists the year in which these percent shares were assigned. And it really shows that the administration makes a very big difference. Who's in power in Congress and in the presidency, because those are what the overall levels of funding are set at. And so if the administration is favorable towards transit and capital investments in blue dot places, you have a robust capital investment grant program. If there is not an administration that is favorable to blue dot cities in red states, you have a lower CIG program. Why does New York have two humongous projects? Because maybe it's because Chuck Schumer is there, maybe, but no, it's two great projects, really very important projects. I'm not demeaning the projects, but I mean, politics plays a lot of involvement in this process as well. When there's money now with this administration, we don't know what's going to happen in November, and probably in November, we won't know what's going to happen in November. It's going to be a while before we know what the outcome of the elections are. But the fact that there was a lot of money for the CIG program means that that list that John showed has gotten longer because everyone wants to take advantage of the revenue that's there now. Everyone is rushing in to get their project into the pipeline before December. And so that's what we're seeing. We want to position our program here well for competing in the program. We don't want to be overly optimistic in terms of expectations, but we want to have you, help you be project ready to get these things done. So if that's helpful.
And so with that, because of just the data we've seen historically since 2014, we're recommending for those larger projects of $3 billion or more in total project cost that we assume a 40% CIG share in the model. And then for those less, we think it's prudent to be able to assume a 49% CIG share given what we've seen historically. And then I also wanted to highlight there have been some recently proposed changes to the FTA CIG program and how projects are evaluated. And the CATS team is well aware of this and is looking at it through this lens as well. But what it really does is it focuses on supportive station area zoning and affordable housing around those station areas for those fixed guideway projects or high capacity projects. So that will be critical as the program is developed. And then there's also a focus on communities at risk and essential services. So FTA, similar to the conversation that you heard earlier today, is looking at not just jobs and homes, but also looking at how do these projects serve a myriad of critical services for the public.
Can I ask a question on that slide?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Why is congestion relief not highlighted, number one?
There weren't any changes made to the congestion relief section. There's no proposed changes made to the congestion relief section of the FTA CIG program. My apologies. The bold show the sections of the program in terms of the evaluation of projects where there were proposed changes made.
All right, and next question, and this may be preempted, but I'm going to do it anyway. Say this goes to the legislature and they give a head nod to put it on a referendum, and the county puts it on the referendum and it passes. How soon do you get in the pipeline and how soon do you know what kind of funding you're going to receive? I mean, is it a, we've checked all our boxes and we're waiting on the Fed to say,
Well,
here it comes?
I'll turn it over to Kelly, but I will say I think the pre-project development work that y'all are doing is
Save time.
phenomenal to well position you to be aggressive as soon as that point happens.
Yeah, exactly, and I think, we can make a decision at the point that we have approval on the referendum to go ahead and enter the federal pipeline and start the project development process. The sooner we do that, the sooner we advance. From project development, we have to meet all those thresholds, receive a medium rating, and then we go into engineering phase. And it's during that phase that the FTA will evaluate you for the full funding grant agreement. But at that point, we've kind of met the evaluation threshold to be allowed into the engineering phase, so much more likely to get federal funding at that point.
Thank you.
And then the less exciting.
Could you go back 1 second? I just want to point one thing in your, okay. The thing that didn't change the commitment of funds. Very important. It's why this measure has to pass, because we cannot commit the funds to, towards the federal match unless there's a measure in place. And so this measure is critical.
One other comment there to Mayor Knox, and this sort of slid, we talked about it earlier in the day, but maybe in not a very explicit way. So Ms. Goforth mentioned that the contract associated with design for the red line, that was about spent. So we will need additional spending for design, environmental, other things pre-work on the red line. And so I will tell you, as we go into January, February, March, as we start to talk about our FY 2026 budget, we will propose to continue moving that work forward so that we can be better positioned if and when the time is right to keep that project moving. We don't want to have it pass and then say, well, if we'd have just done a year's worth of work, we'd be ready, but now we have to wait another year. And so you will see that in the FY 26 budget as a proposed capital item.
One other thing on this chart, thank you, Brent, that's very true. There's a lot of emphasis in the changes in the program criteria on things like housing affordability, equity, service to disadvantaged populations, mobility for people of certain income limits, economic development potential. All of the jurisdictions who can have some control over improving the chances of how we can score in these categories by looking at these. CATS has undertaken and is undertaken, gotten some federal money, was it the Red Line, Kelly? For transit-oriented development. And those kind of studies are very important because they'll help when we do go to get the projects rated for the program, they'll help improve ratings.
So moving forward in terms of discussing additional assumptions in the model, looking at FTA formula funding with some of the updated information we're receiving on the projects, we'll be able to get a little more granular in terms of some of the formula funding that will be generated by the delivery of new service and new projects. So CATS currently receives FTA funding based on population as well as the existing services it operates today. However, as you add new services, whether it be bus or some of those high-capacity corridor services, you will generate statistics that will then create new federal formula funding for the system. So we'll be able to get a little more granular in terms of those assumptions as well. And then leveraging other federal opportunities.
Can I ask a question about that,
Yeah.
please? In looking at the added service, what assumptions are you going to be using for that? Because I've got some questions that I'd like to come back to, but what I was hearing from what you were saying previously, Mr. Cagle, is that the Better Bus initiative hasn't been fiscally constrained to this point. So there's a lot of ideas or plans for Better Bus, but it's not fitting into this revenue model right now. So if you are providing the entire Better Bus initiative for this, I don't know that there's going to be sufficient funding for it at the end of the day. So do you not need to fiscally constrain it first before you add it to that and not the other way around?
That will be part of the process. So as the legislation, which is proposed in draft or proposed at this point, and bus can't be less than 20%. So if the only investment made in bus is Better Bus can't be less than 20% because rail cannot be more than 40%. If it is not the only bus investment made, then those two together would combine. And yes, there may be a scenario as we fine-tune the costs of Better Bus that even without other bus investments, it may be more than 20%. And we, the MTC, the public, will need to talk about trade-offs and alternatives, and there may be things that, while we would ideally, if we had no financial constraints, would like to have, those trade-offs can be made to better serve the system in whole, both with rapid transit corridors and bus. And so that's kind of what I was trying to say is I don't think there has been an active decision about bus and its funding yet, and we need to have that conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, so when Jason presented on the Better Bus Plan earlier, that was the recommendations for priorities out of Envision My Ride. So it's not the full program that was unconstrained in Envision My Ride. So the next steps from the priority recommendations from the Better Bus effort is to develop a cost estimate for that. So what are the number of hours of service? What are the costs for all of the amenity improvements, the fleet required to operate that service, and plug that into the financial analysis along with the projects to see what that looks like. Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Is BRT part of Better Bus?
No. BRT is a mode to serve a rapid transit corridor.
So, you know, I've asked this question before, but if we eliminated BRT and instead went down a path towards light rail, aren't there some significant savings there if we built light rail instead of BRT?
No. But, I mean, I don't know. I can't give you an answer based on that question. BRT, generally speaking, costs less per mile than light rail does. But if the question is, could you deliver a light rail project, even if it's not what's defined today, and still meet a minimum operating segment per the FTA guidelines and be financially feasible? What I'm saying is I'm not prepared to answer that question today, but I will be prepared to answer that question. Katz will be prepared to answer that question. But stepping back from the Silver Line or any specific project, BRT, generally speaking, is less expensive per mile than LRT is. However, talking about the Silver Line, BRT would be a very expensive project. I don't want to give the wrong impression. It would be less expensive than light rail, but it will still be multiple billions of dollars as BRT, because one of the main driving factors of the cost of the Silver Line is it doesn't utilize existing corridors. It's carving a corridor through a heavily urbanized area, and that makes it very expensive, and that would be true with BRT as well, although we would have more flexibility to think about existing road networks and dedicated lanes, but it would still be a very expensive project.
Right, and I have also read, and I don't have facts to back this up, but I've read in numerous places that BRT generally is more expensive to maintain after it's built than light rail. So on the operating side, it's more expensive.
I think that's sort of the common wisdom, that LRT provides a lower operations and maintenance cost over the life of the project than bus in general does, but we could provide more information on that. But I think that's sort of the common thinking, yes.
Right, thank you.
That's true.
And then looking at leveraging federal opportunities, how can we use some of the opportunities out there for discretionary funding to support the program as well, and evaluating what are appropriate assumptions to incorporate there to support the program. We'll move into the sales tax revenue, and obviously I think we've already touched on the parameters of proposed legislation, but we'll touch on that briefly as well. So the way we're looking at any proposed new sales tax is to look at the existing Article 43 sales tax from a historical growth perspective. And what we've seen since 2001 is that the Article 43 sales tax has grown at a 4.6% rate. You can see how it's ebbed and flowed over the course of the past 20-plus years. The dot-com bubble recession, obviously the Great Recession being the largest dip there, and then the COVID-19 pandemic having a brief dip as well. But overall, on the straight line, which is the gray dashed line, it was a 4.6% growth rate. And so we are updating sales tax estimates based on the FY24 collections, as well as the budgeted FY25 number, and are recommending a conservative 4% sales tax growth rate. Again, we're looking at this over the long-run period, and so we think it is most prudent to be conservative in the estimate, because this is the largest component or driver on the revenue side and has the biggest potential to create issues in the future. And so being conservative now is better in the long run than overestimating how much revenue you have and having to cut the program in several years. And so it is our recommendation at this point to keep a 4% sales tax growth, which is the existing growth rate in the model.
In the CATS model, for your current system.
I think everyone's very familiar with the parameters of the proposed sales tax legislation: 40% to transportation or roads, 40% to 40% rail, 20% bus splits, with no more than 40% of the new sales tax being used to support rail transit. It's a 30-year look-back period with an estimated start date of July 1st of 2027. It's an assumed start date of the new sales tax. And then from that initial 30-year period, there is a rolling look-back in terms of that cap that needs to be met in order to satisfy the proposed legislation. And then the other provision in the proposed legislation is that the red line must be 50% complete prior to the completion of any other rail projects.
Can I ask a question? Why is the assumed start date of the sales tax 2027 versus 2026? If indeed this thing gets out of the legislature, goes through the ballot, we vote on it and approve it in November of 2025, my assumption would be the sales tax would start the following year, 2026.
It's a conservative estimate.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt you, it just benefits you if we're wrong and it's approved earlier, but it certainly hurts the financial model if you're wrong and it's approved later. So it's just a conservative assumption.
I think legally it could go into effect July 1, 2026.
Sorry, yeah, that's my apologies, that's a typo. It's FY27, which would be July 1st of 26.
Oh, okay.
Fiscal year 27.
Yes, fiscal 27, my apologies.
Thank you.
And then fare box revenue assumptions, we touched on this briefly, but looking at, instead of just a blanket fare box recovery rate, looking at individualized mode-specific fare box recovery rates, because you do have different fare box recovery rates across different modes. And then for those modes in which CATS does not currently operate, looking at peers to really understand what some estimated fare box recovery rates could be. Inflation and cost escalation assumptions. These are critical because at a 3.5% cost escalation rate in 10 years, your project just got 41% more expensive. And so the best time to deliver a transit project was yesterday, is the joke. Obviously not funny, but the reality is, these cost escalations have tremendous amount of impact. I think we've seen it significantly because of the inflation over the past few years. But on a long-run period, what we've seen, these are the National Construction Cost Index and the Atlanta Construction Cost Index, which is the closest peer city to Charlotte in terms of geography that has one of these indexes. And over the 20-year period, Atlanta was at 2.9% in terms of growth rate. Nationally, we're at 3.2%. So over the long run, there has been cost escalation around the 3.5%. And we're recommending 3.5% because as you go through the CIG process, that is the requirement that FTA has you put into the financial plan for those applications. And so it's important to be consistent with that as you look at your program now and as you move forward. And then finally, we're doing a cost allocation review of CATS's existing services and administrative costs to better understand how, as new services are potentially implemented, that can be captured from an assumption perspective in terms of the administrative costs that would be needed to support that overall once those services are delivered. So that work is currently in process and supporting updates to the model. We've done a preliminary review of the 2023 cost allocation plan, looking at CATS's Article 43 financial model, and looking at NTD data, and we'll have assumptions updated in there so that as these new projects come online, we better understand what the fully allocated cost per revenue hour is on the O&M side. So then, in terms of next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we're in the process of doing a lot of work right now, in addition to Kelly's team that's doing a lot of work in terms of updating some of the project costs as well as the phasing inputs. And so we're really planning to work diligently for the rest of 2024 to make sure that we have the best and most updated assumptions, because it's really critical that we get this right with the adoption period being in spring of 2025. In early 2025, we'll be able to do some constrained scenario testing, which sounds like it will be very exciting, and look forward to that with the MTC, to then get to the finalized financially constrained TSP for the MTC to adopt the transit system plan. And with that, I'm happy to take any additional questions or conversation.
Thank you.
I've got a
ma'am.
question. I would like to go back to the models that the managers went over back in May. Certainly looking to my other managers to weigh in here, but I was certainly never under the impression that the amounts listed under scenarios 2, 3, 4, and 4A were just sort of the balancing number, if you will, for Better Bus, and that they didn't actually accurately represent what is in the previous slide, which is I guess the known cost estimates today for Better Bus, that only of late have we started to hear that the Better Bus costs would exceed the 0.2 of a penny that we were all under the impression were going to be allocated for bus. So is it possible to at least get another one of these columns that would show, based on what we know today, we know we're updating things, but based on what we know today, how much would be needed to actually fund Better Bus based on current assumptions? I don't know if it's 0.2 or 0.24 or something like that. Because the issue that I'm having as I'm looking at this and listening to the conversation about Better Bus is that there is not a current scenario where all of that fits within 0.6. The conversation in the room for months revolved around, we can still deliver the plan, but there's going to need to be some concessions made, and it was falling on Silverline East to be switched to BRT, but that was quote-unquote okay because that would fit into the bus bucket. But if bus is going to cost more than 0.2, well, you've already spent your bus bucket on Better Bus, which means now there's nothing for BRT, there's nothing for Silverline East. And so my concern is that, I certainly haven't watched all of the other presentations that were made to the other localities as the resolutions for the draft legislation were considered, but our assumptions were it was going to be 40% for roads, and that's locked in, It's going to be 40% for transit. I realize this specific phrasing is up to 40%, but we were all working under the assumption that it would be 40% for transit and 20% for bus. But if Silverline was going to get anything, it would have to be BRT, which would fall in the bus bucket. But essentially, we've double spent our money already. So can we at least, based on slide 9, of what these costs would be, like I don't even know how far off we are today. I realize that we will then have to make some concessions, but it feels like we're double spending our money, and there wasn't an accurate reflection of the known costs
I think.
even today.
So while I saw these scenarios for the first time late last week, as I look at them, I think they are valuable scenarios, and as Jonathan said, I applaud the managers for doing this work, but they really were intended to do a couple things, and this, they have done it very well, and the answers won't change. Scenario 1 answers the question, can we do everything as envisioned with 60%? And the answer is no. You need 90% of a penny. And that won't change because these projects will not get less expensive. Scenario 2 asks, can we do the Red Line and Silver Line East and Better Bus and nothing else? And the answer is no, because the Red Line and Silver Line East combined are more than 40%. And as Mayor Higdon pointed out, I think that if the funding split changed, right, because it is less than 45%, but I think what will happen as we update the costs, it no longer works again because all of a sudden, all of the project costs have gone up, and now you're over the new threshold unless it's, but I don't know that, but that's what I suspect. But all scenario 2 answers is, can you do 2 of the corridors, Red Line and Silver Line East, and nothing else, and then the remainder going to bus? And the answer is no, because of the 40% cap. It's not because of the total funding. And so even though bus says 0.06, there is still 10% available, because if you look at the bottom of scenario 2, it's only at 0.5, and it could be up to 0.6. So again, but I don't think that was the purpose of that scenario. It was to answer the question, could you do that, just those 2? All the others are just sort of testing to see what you can do, and they did that. Now, what I would say is, I think we need to start testing other scenarios, and it may be that the Silver Line West and East need to be converted, or the discussion needs to be about BRT. I don't know that that's true, but those are all trade-offs and alternatives that the conversation needs to be had with the MTC, with the public, and we make informed decisions. And yes, this model could be rerun today, tomorrow. It will still be fundamentally flawed because the project costs are not the most current, and they will not be until January.
And I understand that, and I realize that not everybody that was in that room is in this room today, but the way it was presented to us, and then the way that we took it back to our boards was, if this is approved as 40-40-20, it will be able to, quote, deliver the plan with the exception of Silver Line East needing to be changed to BRT. And so if there are in fact additional constraints, or these costs are so off that there are going to need to be additional lines cut, I don't want to speak for another town, because we all know how Matthews landed when our line got changed, but I would think that that would be an important part of the conversation in any of the communities. So, as an example, if it turns out that because of these updated costs, I don't know, maybe there's no longer money for Blue Line extension, that might change Pineville's interest in supporting the legislation. But instead, we were asked to support the legislation before the costs were confirmed, or what it could actually buy was confirmed. And so, so my concern is that just based on the data today, it's not actually all fitting within 0.6. And I feel like that is important information for us to have, because our communities are wanting to know what's going on. And there are going to be many, many months before any of the updated numbers are even available. But I feel like what I'm seeing today, or hearing and understanding now, is that we were working with bad data.
You
for-
weren't working
for
with bad
months.
data, you were working with the data that was available at the time.
But 0.1 for Better Bus under scenario 4 doesn't fund, you said before that doesn't fund what's in slide 9.
It doesn't.
Right, so
Slide
that's
9,
bad
it does
data,
not.
Mr. Cagle.
But that is a decision that you could make. I would strongly recommend against it. But if you made the decision to say, we're going to fund Better Bus at half of the level, right, at 0.1 rather than 0.2, that would be a decision that the MTC can discuss and then take to the public. I'm not saying that there's any one set funding level that you have to decide. All I'm saying is, before you start making those decisions, I would think that you would want to have the project costs and the costs of operations and maintenance to be as current as possible. And there will be hard decisions and discussions to be had, because neither Better Bus nor the 2030 plan, the Rapid Transit Corridors Plan, have ever been fiscally constrained. And this is the exercise we're going into, is how do we make those fiscally constrained? But I think it's a valuable exercise. I just won't have the updated costs, and those are critical, until January.
And I understand that. All I'm saying is that we were told in that room that 40-40-20 would fund the plan, with the exception of Silverline East needing to change to BRT. It would otherwise fully fund the plan. And what I'm hearing today is that is not true, and there will need to be additional cuts beyond that.
That may be true, but I could not answer that until we have updated costs.
I think we've already answered it with the cost, with the actual cost of Better Bus, even as we understand it today, but that's fine.
All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of our agenda, and I am very appreciative to our presenters who came from out of town, to our presenters locally. It was a really informative day. We've got a lot to think about, a lot of work ahead. Do I need to do a motion to adjourn, or we're not doing that? All right, y'all have a great rest of your afternoon and drive safely.
Somebody stole my damn truck.
Yes.
There was no way, no matter how you manipulated the numbers, that you could sort the lines right. That was what was presented. It wasn't about Better Bus, it wasn't about the rest of the plan, it was scenarios, that was it, it wasn't about this.
It's almost like there's a different,
Right.
there was a different approach to bus in those scenarios. Bus was different right here, actually. Makeup. That's not me. I don't think it was ever kept less than 10% of the program, but it was melted, it's the delta after the BRT.
All right, you have a good day.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you. I ate all my snacks and I'm really full.
I'm going to Kendrick at 7 o'clock. So I got- Then I'm going to sit down. Have you been to Albuquerque?
True statement.
won't tell anybody until you're ready. Yeah. We're all going at the same time. Except for Andrew, who's got kids.
Yeah, Andrew's
all
going on
kinds of
forever. He's got
crazy
kids.
kids in college, and my daughter would have to get married.
Yeah, that's not huge. Well, my daughter's now decided she's going to grad school. She's graduating from MTC, so.
Where's she on grad?